On a quiet battlefield full of fallen soldiers, we learn that a mercenary who survives is considered bad at his job. These fighters get paid a lot of money simply because they are expected to throw away their lives for their masters. Our main character has to listen to this annoying talk from his greedy employers every single day of his life. Tossing his empty flask away, the young man complains that noble employers are always the exact same. They promise land and high titles when they need help, but then they quickly change their minds and lie. Standing on top of the high wall, the warrior smiles and jokes that he must have heard the latest order wrong. Across from him stands the powerful commander-in-chief, looking completely serious and cold. The leader directly orders Jake, the famous captain of the Fang mercenaries, to go out and die. Hearing this ridiculous command, the young captain laughs and praises the leader for his rare sense of humor. Smiling widely, he explains that a simple mercenary like him would never care about dying with the honor of a knight. Silence falls between them as the commander closes his eyes and admits that he got a bit ahead of himself. Looking back at the fighter, the general apologizes for giving him the wrong impression with his previous words. He explains that he actually just wanted to give the captain one final and highly important mission. Pointing out their constant defeats, the leader mentions that their tragic fate has already been sealed. The enemy forces have now cornered his noble family, who defended these peaceful lands for many generations. Looking at the ruins, he explains that knowing there is no escape made him talk too much. Hearing the explanation, the casual captain smiles and claims that he completely understands the situation. Staring coldly at his master, he thinks that this terrible crisis is the perfect moment for him to run away. He thinks it is a real shame because the general was actually one of the few decent nobles in the empire. Jake wonders if the leader wants him to find a safe escape route so he can finally get his payment. The general explains the enemy will attack tomorrow and wants the mercenaries to fight by his side until he dies. To pay for this extremely dangerous job, the leader pulls out a massive red gem and offers it as a reward. While explaining that the treasure is worth 3 years of expenses, the leader is shocked when Jake slaps it away. Looking back with a serious face, the angry captain asks if the lord thinks he is a fool just because he smiles. Jake points out that his men are being used as simple shields just to buy a few extra seconds for a running noble. Pointing to the ruins, the warrior explains that the enemy will never show mercy and let them walk away safely. The general argues that the enemy only cares about the nobles and will ignore simple mercenaries once he is gone. Laughing out loud, the crazy captain smiles and claims they both know the dark truth about what happens to fighters. The enemy is a sworn foe who wants to destroy them and enters a quiet forest filled with fallen warriors. They spot a lone soldier coughing by a tree, and one of them steps forward to check on him. But it is actually a deadly trap, and the coughing fighter quickly takes down the guards. Beneath the helmet, we see our captain smiling as the enemy realizes they walked right into an ambush. Panicked screams echo through the woods when they realize these are the famous Fang mercenaries. The angry leader on his horse yells that they have no honor for disguising themselves among the dead. Jake does not care about his complaints and swiftly defeats the boss with one quick strike. Looking down at his fallen target, the cool warrior remains completely calm. Looking at the jewel on the floor, the captain mentions that he has defeated many leaders to survive this long. He steps closer to the commander and warns him that the enemy forces are extremely eager to destroy them first. The general remains completely silent as he processes the harsh reality of the situation. The captain then asks if the commander planned everything just to use the mercenaries as decoy bait. With a cold expression, the leader simply replies that he only wants the warrior to complete the task. Reaching for his sword, the general threatens to take down the captain and assume control of his group. Hearing the bold threat, the skilled warrior quickly slides backward to create some distance on the wall. Looking back with disgust, the young captain claims he thought this lord was different from other corrupt nobles. Standing under the dark sky, the noble leader surprisingly offers a very sincere apology to the fighter. The mercenary tells him not to worry, because defeating a terrible boss works out perfectly for him. He explains that handing over the general to the enemy forces will not make him feel bad at all. The leader realizes the captain wants to offer his head to the rebels to secure his own freedom. The captain admits that he would love to run away, but knows the lord already made plans to trap them there. As a responsible leader, he feels the need to offer 2 top targets so his men can finally go free. Hearing this crazy plan, the general slowly turns around and wonders if the captain wants to sacrifice himself. The general wonders if the young captain is actually willing to sacrifice himself just to protect his subordinates. Jake explains that he dragged his crew into this mess on a whim, so he must take full responsibility as their captain. Hearing this noble speech, the leader looks completely stunned before letting out a soft laugh at the sudden realization. Looking at the empty stone wall, the commander covers his face and sighs about the terrible rulers he had to serve in the past. Staring back at the warrior, the noble quietly admits that he wishes he could have served under someone like him instead. Suddenly, the fighter leaps forward with his weapon ready as he prepares for a final decisive clash on the high wall. Instead of fighting back, the general stands completely still with a calm expression as he accepts his ultimate fate. A sharp slash echoes through the night as the young warrior realizes he could not avoid this tragic ending after all. The young captain quickly realizes that the massive gap in their power is simply too big to overcome. Bitterly thinking about natural talent, he decides that this is actually a fine way to end his journey. Smiling through the pain, he remembers that he ordered his men to run away so he could finally rest in peace. Although he was prepared for this end, he wonders what would happen if he had the same chances as other people. Fading into the darkness, he wonders how high he could have climbed if he had been born with better opportunities. Everything turns completely black while some strange, muffled voices slowly start to echo in his mind. A young servant boy suddenly appears and begs his master to wake up from his deep sleep. Opening his eyes, the blonde boy looks at the unknown teen and wonders who the person standing before him is. He slowly raises his hand to see what is happening, but everything feels incredibly strange. Without any warning, the worried servant delivers a loud slap to the face of the young master. Rubbing his cheek, the young man is completely shocked by the sudden physical contact. He wonders who would dare to strike him while the helper keeps crying and begging him to hold on. The boy calls him young Master Lucian, which only makes the warrior more confused about his situation. Staring blankly ahead, the hero tries to process this completely unfamiliar name. Sitting in a luxurious bed, he looks at his hands and realizes he has somehow woken up in a different body. Feeling a deep sense of unease, the young warrior looks down and notices that something is terribly wrong here. The blonde boy sweat drops as he wonders what happened to his actual physical body after that final battle. His old hand was completely covered in battle scars, but this new skin is incredibly smooth and clean. While trying to understand his situation, he looks down at the strange red-haired kid crying on the bed. The young warrior is confused by the crying brat, who was just slapping him a few seconds ago. The weeping helper explains how relieved he is because he truly believed his master had passed away. Kneeling by the bed, the servant mentions that he would have been executed if the young master died. The captain feels incredibly annoyed by all the weird things the dramatic kid is saying right now. He feels completely disconnected from fancy words like noble families and personal servants. Memories of his final clash on the high wall remind him that he definitely met his end back there. Shaken by the memories, he quickly touches his throat to make sure his head is still attached. Silence fills the giant bedroom as both of them sit there staring at each other in confusion. After carefully evaluating the strange situation, the clever warrior arrives at one solid conclusion. Slipping out of the warm sheets, he accepts that he has somehow taken over a complete stranger's body. He notices his new look and realizes he now possesses a shockingly beautiful face that is completely different from his own. Standing in front of the giant mirror, he is amazed by how incredibly handsome his new face looks. Looking around the massive bedroom, he can easily tell that this family is extremely wealthy. The captain decides he needs to gather some information about the person whose body he now controls. He clears his throat and calls out to the nervous helper because he wants to ask some quick questions. The warrior asks what year they are, in which immediately confuses the poor servant standing before him. The boy replies that it is the imperial year 846, causing the captain to freeze up. That means he has returned 15 years into the past and now has a second chance at life. Although he does not understand how this happened, the hero decides to calm down and focus on what needs to be done. He stares coldly at the helper and asks if the young boy has a death wish for slapping him earlier. The warrior demands to know how a simple servant dares to touch his master without any permission. He wonders if the rules of this mansion somehow changed while he was sleeping in his bed. Looking deep into the servant's eyes, the captain asks who he actually is to get some real answers. The servant looks completely terrified and bows deeply to beg for his life after realizing his huge mistake. The crying boy explains that his master is actually Lucian Valdek, the third son of the prestigious family. Hearing this famous name makes the warrior freeze in absolute disbelief as he processes the information. He recognizes the grand emblem and realizes he is now part of the legendary Valdek clan that supports the empire. This powerful family serves closely beside the emperor and holds authority almost equal to the royal crown itself. The captain knows this place extremely well, because 15 years ago he worked right here as a simple gate guard. He expected to return to his old low-ranking job, but somehow became the third son of this noble house instead. In his past life, he had to endure constant humiliation and harsh treatment just because of his low social status. The former captain looks back at his past life and wonders why this amazing opportunity only arrived after his death. He remembers his old regrets and wonders how far he could have climbed if he had been given a real chance before. The warrior accepts this mysterious twist of fate and decides to show the world exactly what he can do in this new body. Opening the heavy doors of his room, he steps out to face a bright new world full of endless possibilities. A confident smile appears on his face as he resolves to live this second life to the absolute fullest. Outside, we see the incredibly grand mansion of the famous family, which looks more like a royal castle. Walking through the hallways, he admits that he visited many places as a mercenary, but nothing compares to this duchy. The pure luxury of the golden decorations makes him realize that this family is on a completely different level of wealth. Although everything feels very strange, he knows he must adapt to this rich lifestyle as quickly as possible. As they continue walking, he notices that the nearby maids are staring at him with very weird looks. The helpers whisper to each other and wonder if this handsome boy is actually their young master. They seem completely shocked to see him outside his room and wonder how long he has been hiding away. Feeling their heavy gazes, the captain realizes that the atmosphere in this house is definitely not normal. He quietly asks Hans about this weird behavior, and the helper explains that nobody has seen him in a very long time. It turns out the original owner of this body spent 1 year and 2 months locked away in complete isolation. The young warrior wonders why someone with so much luxury would choose to lock himself inside a room for so long. Looking around the grand hallway, he realizes that living freely in such a strict household is practically impossible. This mansion belongs to the legendary giant who has protected the empire with absolute rules and principles. That terrifying ruler is none other than Grand Duke Sigmund, who commands respect from everyone in the land. The hero realizes a strict father like that would never let his own son waste away in a dark room for no reason. He suspects the original owner of this body was either completely abandoned or hidden away due to some big secret. While planning to avoid the Grand Duke at all costs, a massive foot suddenly steps right in front of them. A calm voice suddenly speaks out and expresses relief that the rumors about the young master being safe are true. An elegant older gentleman smiles warmly and says he is incredibly happy to see the boy after a whole year. Staring at the smiling man, the protagonist instantly remembers a very important figure from his past life. This refined man is Edwin, the head butler, who rose from being a childhood hostage to managing the entire estate. He is widely known as the absolute right hand of the Grand Duke and holds massive influence inside the mansion. The warrior begins to sweat because running into such a sharp person could easily expose his low-class behavior. He realizes his only real advantage is that even this legendary butler has not seen the young master for a year. To survive this tense encounter, the clever captain decides to use his past memories to act like a true noble. Looking closely at the blonde boy, the butler internally praises his incredibly elegant and noble behavior. The young master flashes a charming smile and thanks the older man for worrying about his long recovery. He explains that he decided to step outside to finally look into the family affairs he has been neglecting. The warrior casually asks if any major problems happened in the mansion during his time away. Edwin gently smiles and replies that the household remains perfect, while expressing relief that the boy is fine. Laughing off the tension, the captain is glad that the sharp elder does not suspect anything strange about him. He decides to turn around and head back to his room, because staying outside for too long is getting exhausting. Before he can take another step, the head butler suddenly speaks up and asks him to wait for a moment. With a serious face, the older servant announces that the master of the house wishes to see him right now. A cold sweat runs down his neck as he realizes he cannot escape this terrifying confrontation. Entering the massive office, he spots a powerful figure sitting quietly behind a giant wooden desk. The legendary Grand Duke Sigmund radiates an overwhelming pressure that fills the entire room. Standing before his new father, the young hero tries his best to stay calm under that intense gaze. The giant ruler calls out his name and prepares to ask a highly important question. Looking coldly at his own son, the powerful ruler asks why the young man is still alive. This shocking question completely catches the young hero off guard as he stands before the desk. The blonde boy blinks in confusion and asks his father what he could possibly mean by that statement. Sigmund scowls and admits that he was initially planning to just ignore his son's childish behavior. He mentions how the boy used his mother's tragic passing as a cheap excuse to escape his daily duties. Gripping his chair tightly, the Duke says that locking himself away for over a year was already crossing the line. He raises his voice and accuses the young master of treating his very own life like it is just a game. Hearing these heavy accusations makes the protagonist realize that something is completely wrong here. He suddenly remembers waking up in the bed while his loyal servant was crying and screaming like crazy. Trying to defend himself, the boy stammers that there must be some sort of giant misunderstanding between them. The strict Duke interrupts him and demands that he finally speak his true thoughts for the very last time. He claims the weak boy planned everything from the start, just to get attention from the rest of the family. The ruler explains that the kid deliberately swallowed a handful of sleeping pills to cause a massive scene. Suddenly, a wave of old memories hits the warrior, and he finally understands why this boy was never mentioned. The protagonist remembers working as a simple gate guard here 15 years ago. In his past life, the third son was never mentioned because the poor boy actually died very early on. The terrifying Grand Duke Sigmund is a strict leader who rules this massive family with an iron fist. He has 4 different sons under his wing, and each one of them was born from a different mother. During the 10 years the hero worked here as a guard, he saw the other young lords and their mothers many times. He realized he had absolutely no memory of ever seeing Lucian or his mother during his previous life. The mother passed away from a severe illness, and the fragile boy soon followed her into the grave. Back then the warrior simply assumed they were both sickly, but now he understands there was a darker reason. The tragic loss and dealing with his unstable position in the household was too much for the little one to handle. The lonely youth decided to take a large dose of sleeping pills just to get some attention from his cold father. He completely failed to realize how weak his body had become after staying locked inside his room for over a year. His physical health could not handle the strong medicine, and the poor kid ended up passing away right there on the spot. The hero realizes this is a massive headache, but understands why the Duke acts so cold toward his own son. Looking at his stern father, the hero realizes the Grand Duke must be feeling a lot of hidden pain inside. However, he knows this is absolutely not the right time to worry about someone else's feelings. The young master sweats because he knows his father just gave him a terrifying final ultimatum. In his mind, he can literally hear the sound of his golden future cracking into pieces. The boy wonders what terrible things will happen if his next response fails to satisfy the strict ruler. At best, he might get banished to some remote temple to live as a silent priest for the rest of his life. At worst, he could be thrown into the frozen northern lands to fight off wild beasts in the freezing cold. Gritting his teeth, he refuses to let this amazing second chance at life go to waste so easily. A sharp smile appears on his face as he resolves to protect his precious new future at all costs. Standing straight, the young man finally gathers his courage and decides to speak his mind. He bows deeply and offers his most sincere apologies for bringing shame to the proud family name. The butler watches in surprise as the boy willingly accepts any punishment without making any excuses. Sigmund rests his chin on his hand and remarks that none of his current words can change what he did. Looking straight at his father, the boy calmly explains that the past cannot be changed anyway. Standing tall with high confidence, he announces his clear plan to live a very bright and productive life. Smiling warmly, the young master asks the strict ruler to give him a simple word of encouragement as a loving parent. He mentions how a truly good father should always welcome back a child who shows real regret for his past actions. Standing nearby, the veteran head butler cannot believe his ears after hearing such incredibly bold words. The loyal servant remembers how the boy used to shake with fear, but now stands like a completely different person. A heavy silence fills the massive room as both characters stare at each other while their hearts beat fast. Tapping his desk, the powerful leader growls and asks how his son dares to lecture him on how to be a parent. A small smirk appears on his face as the Duke remarks that he has finally lived long enough to witness everything. The young master stands confidently in front of the massive desk and waits for his father to speak. He maintains a polite expression to show that he is no longer the weak boy from before. While keeping a calm face on the outside, his heart is actually beating extremely fast. The captain lets out a sigh of relief because his risky gamble paid off perfectly. He knows the strict leader respects bold fighters rather than cowards who hide in the shadows. Sigmund remarks that his son has become surprisingly brave after surviving his near-death experience. The powerful Grand Duke then asks the young man about his actual plans for the near future. Looking down, the protagonist decides that his first step is to fix his fragile physical health. After building up some basic strength, he plans to focus on a much more ambitious goal. The hero intends to regain his incredible skills as a master of the blade once again. He remembers his past life as a powerful knight who fought bravely on the battlefield. With absolute confidence, the boy announces that he intends to learn how to use a sword properly. The father is highly skeptical because his son currently has a body that is as weak as a paper doll. Smiling casually, the kid says that eating and sleeping well will surely make him strong in no time. The strict leader stares at him in silence and finally remarks that his son certainly has a way with words. The Grand Duke decides to watch his son closely to see if all this confidence is just a big bluff. Turning to his loyal servant, the ruler orders him to give the boy that specific thing once again. The butler agrees that giving him this reward will be much more useful than just offering empty words. Bowing deeply, the servant promises to prepare everything for the young master immediately. The blonde hero stands there totally confused while wondering what they are actually talking about. Outside the massive mansion, some workers are busy carrying a heavy wooden chest across the courtyard. Opening the lid reveals a mind-blowing treasure filled with countless gold coins and shiny jewels. Both the young master and his servant stare in absolute shock at this ridiculous sight. The protagonist realizes that this crazy amount of wealth is actually just his monthly allowance. Letting the gold slip through his fingers, he is amazed that he gets this much money every single month. A wicked smile appears on his face as he plans to use this fortune for his grand goals. He intends to purchase the rare ingredients needed to brew a legendary body-strengthening elixir. To find these special plants, he heads straight toward the beautiful greenhouse on the estate. Walking through the beautiful greenhouse, the Grand Duke is followed closely by his loyal head butler. Looking around, the servant remembers that the late Duchess loved this peaceful garden more than anywhere else. Since the ruler has not visited this area for a long time, the helper realizes something major must have changed. He knows this sudden visit is definitely because of the shocking change in the young master. Remembering the late Duchess, the butler knows the master could never truly abandon her precious child. Quietly stepping forward, the powerful leader seems to be deep in his own thoughts. Breaking the silence, the Duke coldly remarks that his son used to be absolutely pathetic. He remembers how the boy always rolled his eyes in fear as if expecting something terrible to happen. The strict father complains that the kid used to whine like a wild dog whenever he raised his voice even a bit. Since the boy acted so differently, he assumed the kid only inherited his mother's beautiful looks and nothing else. However, the strict ruler admits that today was the first time he actually doubted his own judgment. Looking ahead, he realizes that he might have been completely wrong about the young master's true potential. The Duke mentions how the boy looked him straight in the eyes, and the butler agrees that the kid did not waver at all. Smiling gently, the servant adds that the young master has a good heart and clearly inherited his father's strong blood. A rare smile appears on the leader's face as he notes that they will just have to wait and see. The leader points out that the boy has a long way to go before solving his actual problems. The loyal butler suddenly brings up a serious issue that needs his immediate attention. He explains that some of the money sent to the third young master is leaking out to the public. The investigator reveals that the second brother, named Geordie, is directly behind this dirty scheme. He even replaced the boy's personal maid with his own spy to keep a close eye on everything. The Grand Duke sighs because he knows the second son still holds a deep grudge against the kid. When the helper asks to step in, the master firmly forbids him from interfering in this matter. Looking down at the water, the strict father says this petty trap is just another test for the boy. He wants to see if his son is actually capable of handling this trouble all on his own. The ruler believes a true lion must open the path to greatness using his very own claws. A few days later, things are peaceful outside the beautiful mansion under the bright blue sky. Inside the halls, the gossiping maids wonder why the young master is locking himself up again. Listening to their mean words, the loyal servant gets incredibly annoyed by their constant whispering. He is deeply stressed because it has already been 3 days since the big chest of gold arrived. The orange-haired helper wonders what his master is planning while looking at the massive treasure. The massive wooden chest is filled to the brim with gold coins and dazzling blue jewels. Looking at his master, the loyal helper realizes how much courage it took to stand up to the strict leader. Tears run down his face as the servant assumes his master is trying to overcome deep sadness. While the helper is crying in the back, the young master is busy playing with his massive pile of cash. A wicked smile appears on his face because this insane amount of money is enough to start his secret plan. The blonde boy intends to use the wealth to brew a legendary potion that can completely fix his weak physical body. Inside his locked room, he carefully mixes the ingredients while keeping his focus entirely on the boiling pot. Looking back at the entrance, the master is glad that his loyal servant is guarding the door without asking questions. He gathered all kinds of professional brewing tools that a wealthy noble boy would normally never touch. To make this work, he needed a ridiculously rare plant that only grows under the light of the full moon. He spent his entire monthly allowance just to buy this extremely precious moonlight herb. The protagonist then orders his helper to quickly go out and purchase every single moonlight herb they can find. Although buying all these cheap flowers makes him look insane, the boy has a massive plan. In just one single year, the price of this exact plant is going to explode like crazy. The value of his investment is going to multiply by 20 times very soon. Grinning widely, the young master laughs at how incredibly rich he is about to become. Thinking back, he admits the Alchemist Guild had a massive amount of courage in the past. Back then, nobody was actually sure if their wild project would even succeed. Still, they went ahead and bought every single moonlight herb across the empire to test it. It was a risky gamble that easily threatened the whole future of their organization. Thanks to their extreme boldness, they actually managed to create something legendary. They successfully invented the famous drink of the gods known to everyone as nectar. Using such a holy name almost got them in big trouble with the temple leaders. But once people saw its amazing healing effects, they quickly praised the creators. Holding the glowing bottle, the boy smiles because he now possesses this divine cure. For 1,000 years, everyone believed that human talent was determined only at birth. People thought your physical limit was an absolute chain that could never be broken. The only thing that shattered this rule was the creation of a legendary potion known as nectar. Drinking this special liquid could turn anyone with zero skills into an incredibly strong swordsman. Although his version is just a cheap copy, it is still the perfect choice to fix his broken physical form. The blonde boy whispers to the previous owner of this body that he is extremely lucky to have him. During a massive war, the Alchemist Guild was completely destroyed because this recipe was too dangerous. The formula vanished from the world, but he managed to recreate it after doing some dangerous research. Without wasting any more time, the boy drinks the glowing red liquid to start the real transformation. Controlling mana depends heavily on how well a person can circulate the natural energy through their system. He is using the potion to force open all the blocked pathways inside his weak frame. Even though the path is open, the protagonist wonders why his body is resisting and causing so much pain. The magical energy flows incredibly smoothly through his body as if finding its rightful place. Looking closely at his veins, he is shocked to find absolutely zero impurities blocking the mana. Floating in a deep ocean of energy, the boy suddenly realizes that the previous owner of this body was a literal genius. Meanwhile, the sun begins to set over the peaceful town, while the loyal servant keeps a watchful eye from the window. Walking back and forth in the hallway, the anxious assistant cannot stop worrying about his master. Suddenly, a soft clicking sound echoes through the corridor as the heavy wooden door slowly swings open. Seeing the young master walks out safely, the orange-haired helper immediately rushes forward with tears in his eyes. Sobbing loudly, the boy complains that he was ignored and feared that something terrible had happened to his lord. Relieved that the crisis is over, the worker holds his master close, while the blonde hero smiles gently at his loyalty. Sharp golden eyes glow with a powerful aura that looks almost like a wild beast. Looking at the boy, Hans is completely shocked and wonders if this is really his young master. The loyal assistant gets closer to inspect the hero because something feels totally different about him. Smiling gently, the blonde master realizes that his helper is actually much sharper than he looks. Since the servant spent so much time with the real master, he easily noticed the sudden shift. Even though his outward appearance requires food and time to change, his core is already different. Inside his chest, a powerful energy flows through his heart at a rapid pace. The amazing transformation is happening so fast that his entire system is constantly adapting. Taking a step forward, the protagonist knows this is only possible because of his original body structure. He is absolutely sure that the previous owner of this form possessed a legendary talent. Standing tall, the boy realizes his potential is in the exact same league as the greatest legends of history. With the right plans, he can easily surpass his past strength from his previous mercenary days. Turning to his loyal servant, the master says that he actually owes this amazing chance to him. Placing his hands on his helper's shoulders, the young noble states that he must reward his loyalty. Grabbing his shoulders, the young master tells Hans to listen very carefully to what he is about to say. With a creepy look on his face, the boy tells his helper to sell everything he owns and invest it all. The blonde boy promises his servant that this move will guarantee him a smooth ride straight to the top. Making a dramatic pose, the master shouts that they are going to climb to the skies together. The young lord admits he is incredibly jealous because nobody ever gave him such a golden opportunity before. 1 week passes and they are both walking down a peaceful dirt path surrounded by lush green trees. Whistling happily, the relaxed master strolls forward with his hands placed behind his head. He feels completely refreshed and wonders if life is actually allowed to be this easy. The protagonist enjoys having delicious feasts prepared for him like clockwork every single day. His luxury room gets cleaned and his soft bedding is prepared without him ever lifting a finger. Tears of joy fill his eyes when he remembers his hard past life where starving was his daily routine. Clenching his fists, the boy is glad he could focus entirely on recovering his broken body. Adjusting his neat collar, the master says he is now finally ready to deal with a major problem. The hero recalls his past life as a guard named Jake and discovers that nobody with that name actually exists here. An entire stranger now occupies the exact guard shift that the protagonist used to work in his previous life. He sighs and thinks this is for the best since meeting his past self would honestly make him die of sheer embarrassment. While the boy is trembling from his funny thoughts, the helper looks at him in confusion before the master turns around. The nervous servant asks if they are really going to the training grounds that his master used to hate with a passion. The protagonist is confused by this claim, so the servant explains how he swore never to return after a terrible event. It turns out the second young master used harsh training as an excuse to beat up the previous owner and make him afraid. Looking at the bright sky, the blonde boy tells his worried assistant that there is absolutely nothing to fear anymore. Looking at his young lord with wide eyes, the servant realizes that the past does not scare his master anymore. Taking a firm step forward, the brave hero decides to lead the way into the training grounds. He turns around with a brilliant smile and tells his helper to just trust him and follow his lead. Deep inside the training facility, some guards are talking quietly about a shocking rumor. One of them asks in disbelief if the weak third young master actually came here on his own 2 feet. The other soldier confirms that the young noble is currently looking around the hall with his servant. Hearing this news, a red-haired supervisor wonders what that foolish brat is thinking by coming here. A green eye shines with malice as the man decides that this unexpected visit might actually be perfect. He immediately orders his subordinate to go and report this situation to a mysterious person. With a wicked grin, the supervisor promises to prepare a very warm welcome for the young master. Meanwhile, the blonde hero enters the main hall and is completely amazed by what he sees before him. He notices an endless supply of spare weapons that can be used without worrying about breaking them. The combat area is massive and allows anyone to perform the most intense movements without any limits. The protagonist is stunned to realize that a single noble family can own such an incredible facility. Looking down, the hero sadly thinks that his old comrades might have survived if they had a place like this. Heavy footsteps echo through the hall as a smug man approaches the pair. The newcomer mockingly reminds the young noble of the time he ran away like a scared little lamb. He continues to sneer at the duo for bringing a simple servant into a sacred hall meant only for warriors. Introducing himself as Hendrik, the instructor asks the hero if he still remembers their abusive lesson from 1 year ago. A memory shows the weak previous owner of the body shivering in terror, while his tormentor enjoyed every single second of it. Instead of showing fear, the young master lets out a terrifying smirk because he thinks this situation is going to be fun. In this world, a knight is seen as the ultimate symbol of honor and pure loyalty. These elite warriors are usually born from noble blood and must master martial arts from a very early age. They can only earn their true titles after achieving great glory and proving their worth on the battlefield. Receiving the title of knight from a liege is usually seen as the ultimate goal of their entire existence. However, the protagonist secretly thinks they are no different from simple hunting dogs wearing expensive collars. Because of this, they are absolutely obligated to show total respect to their lord and his entire bloodline. Looking at the rude instructor, the boy realizes the man acts arrogant because of Lucian's low status. This smug teacher only acts brave because he is secretly relying on a powerful backer behind the scenes. Glancing quietly, the blonde boy wishes he could put this rude instructor through some truly insane training. He wants to completely reforge the man's mind by using some incredibly painful target practice. Doing that right now is bad because the powerful Grand Duke would definitely not sit idly by. Hurting a knight without a proper reason would only create massive trouble and unwanted friction. Coughing lightly, the clever hero realizes that he must wait for the absolute perfect moment to strike. Smiling brightly, the young master announces that he intends to visit the training hall, often to learn new sword forms. The blonde boy wants to catch up on his training, but the instructor finds his sudden motivation highly amusing. Bursting into loud laughter, the smug man tells the third young master that he is actually great at telling jokes. Leaning in closer, the teacher explains that starting his training after the age of 15 is completely useless. He says that sword forms are legendary techniques left behind by the ancestors to help people gain true power. Practicing these movements is supposed to evolve the human body by unlocking ancient secrets of combat. However, the proud teacher adds that this amazing process only works if the person can already control mana. Since that magical pathway naturally closes at the age of 16, training is now just a total waste of effort. The instructor points out that practicing without magical energy is like performing a completely useless dance. With a creepy grin, the man suggests that the young master should just try to become the greatest dancer around. Hearing this cruel mockery, the surrounding soldiers quietly watch the young master to see how he reacts. Another guard whispers that maybe the weak noble should just spend his days doing some quiet gardening instead. Looking at the boy from behind, the proud teacher states that everyone has a specific role that fits them best. Crossing his arms, the smug instructor is extremely pleased to see his target standing completely speechless. Deep down, the wicked man knows that the rule about mana closing at 16 is actually a massive lie he made up. He is absolutely thrilled to see the noble crushed by this fake news, just like a helpless little pet in his hand. Hendrik is convinced the boy is just a terrified little worm who is too afraid to even take a single step. The cruel teacher is already imagining the young noble as a piece of roasted meat ready to be sliced up. Fidgeting with his fingers, the young master quietly mentions that this information sounds a bit different from his own knowledge. He explains that the pathway actually closes at 25, which leaves him plenty of time to learn the sword. The protagonist wonders if the second young master, Jordi, also believes in this weird custom. Fixing his brown hair, the arrogant instructor feels completely safe because he thinks his lie will never be uncovered. Nodding his head, the clever noble agrees that his brother must indeed hold the exact same belief. Suddenly, the boy reaches out and grabs his helper by the hair, before declaring that their entire family is doomed. Squeezing his head, the master asks him to agree, while the poor servant wonders why he is getting dragged into this mess. Covering his face, the dramatic noble starts screaming about how even a street dog knows this basic common sense. His loud voice echoes through the massive hall as he complains about all the wasted talents who got ruined by fake news. The blonde boy sheds fake tears and acts completely devastated, while the surrounding crowd watches him in absolute shock. Clenching his fists, the noble dramatically shouts that this terrible mistake is a massive crisis for the whole family. With his eyes glowing yellow, the cunning hero asks the teacher if he would ever dare to deceive his own lord's son. The smug instructor suddenly freezes in terror as he realizes he has been completely cornered by his own lies. Sweating profusely, the nervous instructor asks if the young master is accusing him of trying to lie. Standing calmly, the protagonist casually tells the man to just forget about everything he just said. With a terrifying grin, the clever boy wonders if an elite knight would ever do something so incredibly petty. Stuttering badly, the scared teacher quickly agrees, and the young noble pretends to believe him. Shivering under that intense gaze, the man realizes this serious matter cannot be easily overlooked. Inside his mind, the cunning boy promises to teach this rude teacher a painful lesson for lying. Addressing the supervisor directly, the protagonist declares that the man does not understand how serious this is. Explains that he would gladly forgive any personal insults aimed at his own weak reputation. Throwing his hand back dramatically, the noble blames his own past laziness for the lack of respect. Shedding fake tears, the master acts completely heartbroken and claims he cannot blame anyone else. However, he points out that spreading false information about magical energy blocks real talents from joining them. Hearing this speech, the nearby soldiers realize that this mistake could actually threaten the whole territory. Watching from the side, the young helper is deeply moved by his master's seemingly noble speech. Proudly clutching his chest, the hero boasts that his outrage is completely justified by his family name. Glaring at his opponent, the boy asks the petrified instructor if he finally understands his massive mistake. Pointing a finger at the terrified man, the young master promises to report this whole mess directly to his father. Shaking with fear, the instructor cannot understand how a boy who once trembled like a baby lamb is suddenly so brave. The supervisor feels like he is standing in front of a giant beast that is ready to swallow him whole. Suddenly, a fancy ring shines in the dim light as a mysterious newcomer enters and asks what is causing all the noise. Hearing that familiar voice, the scared teacher looks up with massive relief and calls out to the second young master. Meanwhile, a sinister smirk appears on the protagonist's face, because this arrival is actually going to make things better. The arrogant second son named Jordy steps forward and immediately addresses his younger sibling with deep annoyance. Running over like a desperate dog, the sweat-covered instructor quickly tries to explain his side of the story. Raising a single hand to stop him, the smug older brother calmly says that there is absolutely no need for explanations. Jordy leans in and whispers that the instructor is being utterly disgraceful for letting a kid control him. The older brother tells the man to quickly fix his face before things get even worse for both of them. Walking slowly toward the duo, Jordy causes the poor servant to shake with intense fear and worry. Instead of being scared, the young master finds his brother's angry face to be a highly amusing spectacle. Jordy is known as a proper noble who is famous for having an absolutely terrible and rotten personality. He often brings in outsiders to help him, but he always frames and discards them as soon as they become useless. Smiling brightly, the blonde boy greets his older brother, who only responds with a freezing and annoyed look. The arrogant brother immediately calls him a foolish creature, which makes the protagonist pretend to be confused. Jordy claims he watched the entire scene and accuses the young master of completely ruining their family dignity. Lucian shrugs his shoulders and calmly asks his brother to explain how exactly he ruined their family name. The older brother claims the instructor simply made a small mistake because he has not studied theory in a long time. He tells the sweating teacher that using his name to cause this mess was a big error that deserves punishment. But the sibling immediately adds that he will not punish the man because he knows how loyal the instructor is. Looking very serious, the second young master mentions how much the brave teacher has sacrificed for the entire family. Turning his attention back to the hero, the older brother asks if a quitter even has the right to judge others. He proudly advises his younger sibling that he needs to learn some basic respect for their hard-working knights. The arrogant boy continues explaining that the territory only exists because of these strong guards protecting them. He gestures dramatically toward the crowd of soldiers, while declaring how crucial they are to their entire survival. Addressing the onlookers, the older brother asks everyone to forgive this commotion caused by a silly, immature child. Showing a creepy and sharp grin, he promises that he will personally take special care of his foolish little brother. Instead of getting angry, the clever hero lets out a smirk because he realizes his brother is actually quite smart. The blonde boy originally aimed his verbal attack at the teacher, but his sibling is now changing the entire story. By twisting the argument into an insult against all knights, the older brother managed to save his own reputation. Glancing at his annoying sibling, the protagonist decides to let him win this small round for now as he smiles. The clever blonde boy smiles and praises his older brother for acting so wise. He says his brother should have scolded him, instead of being so kind after the misunderstanding. Dramatically clenching his fist, the young master thanks his sibling for giving him such valuable life lessons. Hearing these ridiculous comments, the poor servant mentally begs his crazy master to finally shut his mouth. While looking at the blonde boy, the older sibling tries his best to hold back his massive anger. Shouting loudly, the dramatic protagonist declares that he has learned so much from his brother today. The boy tells his helper that they must immediately write down these amazing teachings on the finest silk. The older brother tells himself that he will use this opportunity to completely erase Lucian's weak image. He wants to show everyone that the useless third young master of the past does not exist anymore. Stepping forward, the blonde boy calmly asks for permission to leave the training hall now. Leaning in closer, he whispers that dragging this situation out will not benefit either of them. Glaring down at his sibling, the older brother asks if he really thinks he can just walk away so easily. With his eyes glowing gold, the young master asks if the older brother has forgotten something important. He whispers that their father is watching him, and since he has nothing to lose, the older brother should be careful. Turning around, the clever protagonist takes his brother's silence as an agreement and slowly walks away. Waving a happy goodbye to his older sibling, the protagonist immediately drags his terrified helper away to escape. Standing in the empty hall, the sweating teacher nervously calls out to his master while watching the boy leave. Leaning in closely, the anxious instructor asks if it is truly safe to just let the young master walk away like that. With his orange eyes glowing with pure rage, the older brother looks absolutely ready to destroy someone. After leaving the training area, the two boys walk quietly down a peaceful dirt path surrounded by green trees. Glancing at the floor, the nervous servant wonders if they will actually be safe after causing such a massive scene. The helper mentions that the second young master is well known for having an incredibly wicked and vengeful mind. Crying out loud, the dramatic sidekick claims that the evil sibling will definitely find a way to get revenge. Visualizing himself as a helpless puppy, the terrified servant fears that the mustache knight will make him disappear. He recalls how painful it is when a useless boss makes a terrible mistake and then pretends that nothing ever happened. Showing a confident smile, the blonde hero tells his friend that such a terrible thing will never happen to them. Hans sniffs back his tears while realizing that his master wants to protect him. Reaching down to help the kneeling boy, the kind master acknowledges how much his loyal servant has suffered. Smiling softly, the blonde noble admits that a foolish boss always causes the most trouble for his subordinates. Gently patting the servant's head, the young lord says, "Things must have been especially hard for his personal helper." Looking incredibly serious, the determined hero decides to make a solemn vow to his emotional companion. He promises that he will never let his allies live in constant fear or face disrespect because of his past mistakes. Under the bright blue sky, the young master asks the tearful servant to put in their best efforts together from now on. Sealing this strong bond with a firm handshake, the two companions officially solidify their new alliance. Soon after, they arrive back at the massive and beautiful family mansion, where the sun shines brightly. Walking down the giant corridors, the blonde boy is surprised by how peaceful the entire estate seems to be. The protagonist walks with his servant, while wondering why his wicked older brother is acting so quiet lately. He knows very well that the arrogant sibling is not the type of person to just sit back and take a defeat. Suddenly, the hero gets his hands on a mysterious letter, and quickly uncovers a petty trick being cooked up. Holding the paper tightly with a furious expression, the protagonist mutters that he has waited a long time for this day. Seeing his master's anger, the loyal helper gets incredibly fired up and shouts that they cannot let this slide. Lucian asks Hans if he is ready to go, while the servant matches his fiery energy. The blonde hero gets incredibly angry because someone actually dared to cut his monthly allowance. Shouting loudly, the young helper is also furious because his own salary was cut during this scheme. Earlier that day, the protagonist was happily expecting a budget letter to stock up on necessary items. He was looking forward to a fully replenished account to buy some extra moonlight grass for his work. Smiling brightly, the young noble held the envelope while imagining his bright future with all that gold. But his joyful smile instantly freezes when he notices something very strange about the official document. Dropping the paper on the floor, the confused boy stands stunned in the middle of his luxurious room. The paper shows his allowance is cut by 75% and the servant loses 30% of his pay. The blonde boy realizes his evil second brother managed to pull this off by using a spy inside his annex. Stepping forward, the duo heads toward the target because stealing money is a major crime in their society. Grabbing the fancy door handle, the protagonist knows his past neglect is the main reason for this mess. With his golden eyes shining, the clever hero remembers exactly how he lost control of his own finances. After his mother passed away, the weak prince originally trusted another person to manage his entire budget. That trusted manager was a former headmaid named Dana, who had stayed by his side for a very long time. Instead of their old manager, a brand new headmaid now controls the budget of the entire household. Walking right up to the boys, the annoying woman gives them a fake greeting with a very dramatic voice. She introduces herself as Jenny, explaining that she is the official replacement for their old manager Dana. The sassy woman points out that the young master used to spend all his time hiding away in his dark bedroom. Smiling mockingly, she asks if his long period of useless wandering is finally over at last. This disrespectful tone instantly makes the loyal helper shout at her to watch her language. But the calm protagonist holds up his hand and gently tells his angry friend to settle down. Waving his hand, the blonde boy suggests that they should skip all the useless small talk for today. Holding the official paper tightly, he states that they have much more important things to discuss. Listening closely, the smug maid simply looks at him with an amused and curious expression. Slapping the document forward, the young lord directly asks if she is the one who wrote this terrible plan. Hearing his question, the rude maid cannot even hide her massive giggle as she covers her mouth. Laughing out loud, she happily admits that she indeed created that budget document herself. The woman claims she only followed the official rules that were left by the previous manager. She acts deeply offended by this intense interrogation since she allegedly worked so hard for them. Jenny claims that managing the budget was originally the young master's job anyway. The blonde hero realizes she is using his past laziness as an easy excuse. Accepting his own past mistakes, the boy knows he cannot complain about the general budget cuts. Stepping forward, the clever protagonist points out that there is still something very wrong here. He explains that his father recently gave extra money to increase the salary of all the servants. The boy gladly accepts this change because the hard-working staff deserves some nice compensation. But his golden eyes glare as he asks why his loyal helper was the only one to get a massive pay cut. He directly asks the rude woman if this obvious target on his companion is a bit too blatant. Faking a surprised look, the smug manager instantly claims it was just a simple mistake because of her heavy workload. The maid proudly claims that everyone in the mansion can easily prove how busy she is. Looking back at her subordinates, she asks them to back up her lies right now. Sweating profusely, the terrified maids quickly agree and promise to help their scary boss even more. Watching this cheap comedy show, the young master can only let out a quiet and cold laugh. Turning around, the young lord calmly tells his helper that they should leave the room now. Walking away, the protagonist notices how his own staff seems to obey a completely different boss. Pausing near the exit, the blonde hero asks the smug woman if she truly knows who she is supposed to serve. Flashing a very annoying smile, she confidently replies that she will ask his older brother for advice instead. Under the dark night sky, the main character realizes he must quickly remove any corrupt elements from his life. Wearing dark cloaks, the two companions enter a shady building, while the helper wonders if this is actually fishing. Instead of a peaceful river, they find themselves surrounded by people betting on a brutal underground fight. Smiling under his hood, the clever protagonist whispers that this intense place is perfect for catching their target. A heavy boot steps onto the wooden floor inside a very quiet bar. Cleaning a glass, the bartender tells the cloaked visitor that kids should scram. The employee gets surprised when the visitor does not look scared at all. Pulling back his hood, the blonde boy asks why a gambling den is being so picky. The protagonist explains why he did not just punish the annoying headmaid immediately. It turns out that Jenny is actually not just a normal servant. She is the daughter of his brother's nurse, which makes touching her a massive issue. On top of that, the power structure inside the mansion is completely broken. Since everything is so messy, the clever noble needs a special plan to fix it. Looking closely at the situation, the hero knows he must play his cards perfectly. His father, the Grand Duke, definitely knows about this mess and is using it as a test. Sitting down comfortably, the young master is ready to show everyone his true power. The game begins on the wooden table as several cards are dealt beside the piles of colorful chips. A steady hand confidently grabs the deck to start another round of this intense game. Holding a huge fan of cards, the clever boy prepares to make his next strategic move. Smiling confidently, the young master thinks that making some easy money along the way is a great bonus. A giant mountain of chips keeps growing on the table after several consecutive victories. The surrounding crowd whispers in shock because a legendary veteran is easily losing to a random kid. Sweating profusely, the opponent stands up in complete disbelief after losing all his wealth. Flipping a blue chip, the young noble wonders if his opponent is already planning to run away so soon. With a mockingly polite smile, the blonde boy invites the man to stick around and play another round. Watching from behind, the servant panics, while wondering how his master got so good at card games. Leaning back on the couch, the protagonist loudly asks the room if there is anyone else brave enough to challenge him. His golden eye shines as he calculates that his massive winning streak should finally attract the big boss. He casually taps a tall stack of chips with his foot while waiting for the real target to show up. Right on cue, the heavy entrance doors are slammed open with a very loud bang. Hearing the loud noise, the blonde hero smiles because his secret plan is working out perfectly. Fixing his collar, a large man slowly walks into the room with a very confident smirk on his face. The tall intruder politely apologizes for the late greeting and introduces himself as the manager named Hugo. Snapping his fingers, the boss orders his staff to immediately close down the entire establishment for the day. Hearing the announcement, the other guests quickly leave the building, while the room becomes completely empty. Smiling warmly, the manager says he wants his special guest to enjoy his private playtime without any distractions. Looking closely at his host, the blonde boy is quite surprised that someone recognized him after such a long time. Leaning back in his seat, the young master casually replies that he only came down here for a quick change of pace. Staring at the massive mountain of chips, the tall manager admits he has never seen such huge winnings before. With a polite gesture, the powerful boss asks if he can personally step in as the next card opponent. Raising his eyebrows in amusement, the blonde prince wonders if the big boss is truly ready to play against him. Placing a hand on his chest, the smiling manager admits he has picked up quite a few neat tricks over the years. Hugo wonders if this game will be enough to satisfy his boredom for the evening. Sweating in fear, the young servant begs his master to leave because they already made plenty of money today. The loyal companion warns that the big boss has the most terrifying eyes he has ever seen in his entire life. Smiling calmly, the clever prince realizes his helper is surprisingly good at reading dangerous people. This imposing opponent is known as the Black Shark Hugo, and his name will eventually shake the entire underworld. Starting from the dark back alleys of a single city, he slowly built his reputation using only his sturdy body. After handling gambling and smuggling, he quickly moved on to even worse shady operations. Eventually, the ruthless man became the undisputed king of the night, ruling over the underworld of 5 territories. Using the eventual collapse of the empire as a stepping stone, he would even claim the noble title of Baron for himself. Knowing his future accomplishments, the blonde prince notes that this legendary figure is still just a rookie right now. Showing a dark grin, the clever protagonist reveals that he came to the gambling den specifically to hunt this massive shark. The cards are dealt onto the smooth wooden table as the ultimate match finally begins. Sitting across from the noble, the boss suggests a simple card game with absolutely no betting limits. Smiling warmly, the big manager claims he wants to make sure a special guest has a wonderful time. Hearing this, the blonde boy claps his hands happily because he finally found a worthy opponent. Looking at the happy kid, the boss secretly thinks his opponent is just a spoiled brat acting tough. As the dealer places the first cards, the man believes the young master is walking straight into a trap. The nervous dealer sweats heavily because his previous failure was not part of the boss's original plan. Staring at his target, the manager expects the immature kid to fall deeper into ruin with every single loss. Showing a terrifying grin, the criminal leader secretly vows to bleed his wealthy young opponent completely dry. Suddenly, the blonde noble stops and politely asks if there is some kind of problem with the game. Smiling calmly, the clever boy asks if he can raise a quick question before they start the real match. He gently explains that he already likes the manager, even though they are meeting for the first time today. Looking at the guards at the door, the protagonist notes that a leader's true worth shows through his crew. The young noble looks around the neat room and admits that running an illegal shop of this size is very impressive. Bowing politely, the big boss claims he is always super careful to never make the powerful families angry. Waving his hand dismissively, the blonde boy tells the man to relax since his family is not that strict. Resting his chin on his hand, the clever prince directly asks when they plan to start the massive production. Staring in utter confusion, the powerful manager nervously asks what the noble is even talking about. Leaning closer, the young lord brings up the secret project that is currently being prepared in Vestra. The atmosphere in the dim room suddenly turns icy cold as he mentions the illegal drugs. Hearing this crazy secret, the young servant behind them gasps in complete shock. The dangerous criminal leader freezes in place because he never expected a kid to know his deepest secret. Sweating bullets, the big boss tries to play dumb by asking what these weird chemicals even are. Casually tossing some colorful chips, the blonde kid giggles and tells him to stop playing stupid. Smiling brightly, the protagonist asks if a rival marquis was the one who hired him for this job. His golden eye glows with pure malice as he reveals the exact plan to ruin his family with smuggled drugs. Shaking his head in disappointment, the noble sighs because a powerful marquis should have better plans than this. Looking directly at his terrified opponent, the clever boy asks the manager if he agrees with his statement. Sweat drips down the manager's face as the protagonist notes how insane it is to run this illegal business here. Getting caught by the powerful noble family means absolute death, since they will hunt him down to the ends of the earth. Every single ally associated with that name will try to tear this criminal apart without showing a single drop of mercy. The boss realizes his secret plan has been completely exposed, and his mind starts racing in absolute panic. Facing this specific noble house is the absolute worst nightmare, because they are the worst possible opponents. In the original timeline, this massive secret was only supposed to be revealed after another 2 years had passed. Back then, the powerful Grand Duke raided this exact base only to find a completely empty room with 0 clues left. The clever manager had already escaped the city beforehand, leaving the royal soldiers with absolutely nothing. Getting tricked in his past life is actually turning out to be incredibly helpful for the prince right now. Standing up quickly, the worried boss tries to claim that there must be a massive misunderstanding between them. Putting on a fake worried face, the criminal claims he is just a simple shopkeeper who only makes a few pennies. He loudly insists that some jealous rival must have spread these terrible rumors to ruin his honest reputation. Listening to the desperate excuses, the young master just smiles while finding this whole act extremely amusing. The clever noble then lists his secret hideouts and the private escape tunnel, leaving the man utterly speechless. Staring deeply with his golden eye, the young prince demands to know exactly what stage of production they are in. Cold sweat drips down the manager's face as he realizes all his excuses are completely useless now. Knowing that the prince knows his exact escape routes makes the man's hand shake with immense fear. Looking at the defenseless boy, the ruthless criminal wonders if he should just end his life right here. Behind the door, a loyal guard slowly draws a sharp blade to prepare for a sudden surprise attack. Casually playing with his chips, the young lord advises his opponent to think very carefully before acting. Smiling warmly, the noble warns that the actual chip for this high-stakes gamble is the boss's own life. Flinching instantly, the manager gets told to remember how hard he worked to climb up to his current position. Deeply terrified, the criminal realizes that attacking a member of this powerful family is a massive mistake. Getting caught by them means experiencing a fate that is way worse than a swift and painless death. Dropping quickly to his knees, the desperate manager begs the young prince to show some mercy and spare his life. Kneeling down, the boss figures that the noble must have a very specific reason for visiting him today. The criminal leader realizes he would already be dead if the young prince wanted to destroy him right away. Desperately crying out, the man promises to become a loyal dog who will bark and crawl whenever he is ordered. Seeing their boss on the floor, the other guards instantly drop down and beg for their lives as well. The entire room is now filled with tough criminals begging a child for mercy in complete terror. Quietly tapping his chips, the young lord considers his options while looking at the desperate crowd. He gently slides a single chip forward to show that he might be willing to make a deal with them. Leaning back in his seat, the blonde protagonist thinks that keeping a loyal pet around could actually be useful. Hearing this, the manager quickly offers his full loyalty and promises to do absolutely anything for his new master. Walking slowly toward the kneeling man, the prince points out that things are still a little too simple. The boy believes that a powerful figure like the Black Shark would never be satisfied with just being a simple servant. Placing a hand on the giant's shoulder, the young noble smiles and calls the criminal manager by his actual name. With a mysterious look, the boy asks if the man would rather try to become an official knight instead. This unexpected offer completely stuns the tough boss, who never expected to hear such a holy word in a place like this. Becoming a knight was once his absolute biggest dream before the harsh reality of life forced him to give it up. Training hard and risking his life for his former masters never changed his grim reality. The rich nobles always treated him like a simple tool, because a low birth could never be changed. The criminal secretly wonders if he actually has a real chance to become a respected knight. Slamming his head on the floor, the desperate man asks if he can truly achieve this lifelong dream. Staring with his golden eye, the young prince makes a solemn promise on the honor of his noble family. The blonde boy states that low status will never be an obstacle if the man behaves with true honor. Smiling warmly, the noble asks Hugo if he wants to finally start living as a real person instead of a tool. A few days later, we see the beautiful mansion of the main family shining under the bright sky. Inside the grand estate, the curious maids and servants whisper about a mysterious person being introduced. Rumors spread quickly among the staff about a highly capable new recruit joining their ranks today. Sitting back with his feet up, the blonde prince tells the mysterious newcomer to introduce himself. Stepping forward, the giant man politely states that he will be serving the young lord from now on. Hugo shows a terrifying smile with glowing red eyes while greeting his new fellow workers. Looking through the large window, the scene inside the luxurious office looks incredibly tense. The whispering servants stare in absolute disbelief at the scary man standing beside their master. Clapping his hands together, the relaxed prince decides that the quick introduction is already over. Pointing his finger with a devious grin, the young lord demands they bring the headmaid to him right now. The butler looks completely confused and wonders why his master wants to see the headmaid so suddenly. Smiling brightly, the blonde boy says it is only fair to introduce his new helper to the main staff. A suspicious maid with freckles watches the scene closely while hiding a very sinister smile. She mentions the need to report this new arrival to their superior to prevent any unwanted trouble. Watching them quietly, the clever protagonist expected exactly this kind of negative reaction from the staff. The worried butler tries to keep everyone calm because the internal situation is already a total mess. Knowing they view him as a weak leader, the young prince decides it is time to teach them a proper lesson. Standing in the neat office, we see the fancy ink pen sitting quietly on the wooden desk. The butler begs the young master to understand their difficult position in this massive household. He explains that the powerful headmaid is actually loyal to the second son and cannot be easily controlled. The other servants also beg for mercy because they do not want to get dragged into a dangerous family war. A young helper grits his teeth in sheer frustration because everyone is acting like complete cowards. Suddenly, the brave boy yells at the top of his lungs to wake the scared staff from their weakness. With a flushed face, he reminds everyone that their only true master is the blonde prince sitting before them. He firmly declares that they should never show loyalty to the second son of the family. Hearing this passionate speech, the giant newcomer smiles and steps forward to take control of the situation. The big man tells the nervous butler to step back since these cowards do not deserve his kind words. Walking closer to the desk, the former gang leader tells his young master that he already has a perfect plan. With a terrifying glare, he says that teaching respect to disloyal servants is actually extremely simple. The giant worker asks for official permission to use a slightly rough method to fix their bad attitude. Looking at his new subordinate, the protagonist is highly pleased with how fast this clever man thinks. The young noble happily grants permission since a wild beast is exactly what he needs to clean up his house. The blonde master tells his giant helper to show the disloyal servants something intense. Sensing the dangerous vibe, the butler takes a step back while sweat rolls down his face. Standing right in front of the old man, the massive worker looks down with absolute confidence. The scared administrator wonders what this terrifying newcomer is planning to do next. Looking up close, the giant looks incredibly intimidating and resembles a hardened criminal. Trying to calm himself down, the butler assumes the huge man is just a simple thug from the streets. Leaning forward, he whispers a warning and advises the helper to choose his side very carefully. He mentions that their other young master is extremely cruel and has already won this battle. The butler warns him not to risk his life for a few pennies, while a massive fist begins to tighten. Standing tall, the former gang leader casually remarks that this is a very boring last will. This cold statement completely stuns the older man, who has no idea what is about to happen. Without wasting another second, the giant delivers a massive punch right to the butler's face. Seeing the sudden violence, the surrounding servants scream out in absolute terror. The powerful blow sends the butler flying across the room before he crashes onto the floor. While his young ally freaks out in sheer shock, the blonde prince simply smiles with absolute confidence. Standing tall in the middle of the room, the giant newcomer shows everyone that he is not a man to be messed with. Groaning in pain on the hard floor, the old administrator holds his heavily swollen cheek in utter humiliation. Seeing this brutal scene, the surrounding servants panic and accuse the massive helper of using illegal violence. Cracking his knuckles with a wide grin, the big man confidently replies that he has more than enough authority. Showing a terrifying expression, the former criminal claims to be a true expert at correcting bad behavior. Clutching his bruised face, the defeated butler quietly leaves the office to avoid getting beaten up again. Loud whispering and footsteps can be heard echoing from the grand hallway right outside the double doors. Suddenly, the heavy doors fly open as two strong guards drag the red-haired maid into the room. Struggling against their tight grip, the angry woman demands they release her and threatens severe consequences. The annoyed guard tells her to shut her mouth because she clearly fails to understand her current situation. Getting pushed forward, the furious maid wonders how these low servants dare to treat her with such disrespect. Staring with a venomous look, she silently vows that they will definitely pay a heavy price for this insult. The massive room falls completely silent as the red-haired maid is dragged right in front of her young master. Sweating profusely, the nervous servants quickly report that they brought the head maid Jenny just as they were ordered. Standing tall in the shadows, the guards keep a very close eye on the troublemaker to ensure she does not escape. Looking out the grand window, the blonde prince keeps his back turned while enjoying the tense atmosphere. A cold smile appears on the face of the young lord, who is highly amused by how easy this is. Turning around with a bright wave, the master casually greets the angry woman as if she were a long-lost friend. Pointing at her struggling form, the boy remarks that he only wanted a simple meeting with the head maid. Staring with utter rage, Jenny is furious that the low-ranking servants dared to treat her with such disrespect. Screaming at the top of her lungs, the red-haired woman demands to know the meaning of this extreme disrespect. She warns everyone that the second son Jordy will make sure they all pay a very heavy price for this insult. Shaking his head with a sly grin, the young noble laughs and asks who gave her the right to make demands. Reaching down toward the wooden desk, the blonde boy slowly picks up a leather whip with his bare hand. Gripping the weapon tightly, the young master softly states that their little game is only just starting. Hearing his words, the proud maid flinches in fear, while the prince tells her to speak while she still can. Looking down with glowing yellow eyes, the cold boy calmly states that she will not survive the day. The young prince thinks about the history of public punishments used since ancient times as a warning to everyone. He knows that this extreme method always has a very clear target and a perfect justification. This cruel display definitely leaves a huge impression on the crowd and works well enough to keep order. Back in the present room, the blonde boy walks slowly toward the arrogant woman while holding his black whip. The two opponents stand face to face while a heavy silence fills the entire chamber. Sweat drips down the maid's face because she can feel the immense pressure coming from her master. Looking closely at her, the young lord is completely determined to change things without rebuilding his whole house. Gripping the handle tightly, he decides to show the Grand Duke that the weak third prince is officially gone forever. Snapping his fingers, the blonde noble commands his loyal guards to take action immediately. A heavy hand suddenly grabs the red-haired woman by her shoulder to force her down. Losing her balance completely, the angry worker hits the hard floor with a loud thud. The guards hold her down on her knees right in front of the young lord who watches from above. Even in this bad position, the maid shows a smug smile and advises the boy to think very carefully. She claims that the second son will definitely get revenge if she gets even a single tiny scratch. The arrogant woman adds that she is basically a sister to the second son and expects him to save her. Looking down with a cold stare, the blonde prince asks if these are really her final words. He says it is extremely pathetic that she only screams his brother's name in her final moments. The young master then challenges the kneeling woman to bring out a better excuse before it is too late. Shaking with fear inside the silent room, she can only stutter his brother's name in desperation. Leaning forward, the young noble lists all her massive crimes, including theft and insulting a royal member. The boy warns her that she holds a huge misunderstanding about her true position in this mansion. He explains that his sibling has no real power to save her from getting legally executed. Smiling with a dark expression, the prince says their father might even reward him for doing this. A cold sweat rolls down her cheek as the terrifying truth finally begins to sink in. Holding his black whip, the blonde lord reminds everyone that his brother is just a regular heir. Standing like a tall shadow, the noble boy declares that he has the exact same authority in this house. With a calm voice, the protagonist says he already gave her a very fair chance to behave. The woman's smug face completely vanishes when she realizes no one is coming to save her. Her pale hands begin to tremble violently as the threat of painful death becomes real. Sobbing loudly, the terrified headmaid finally drops her pride and begs the young prince for mercy. The young prince smiles coldly as he prepares to teach his captive a final lesson. Raising the weapon high, he tells the weeping maid to consider herself extremely unlucky. With a loud crack, the whip falls and delivers a swift punishment to the disloyal worker. Meanwhile, outside the grand mansion, the bright sun shines down on a quiet afternoon. Suddenly, the blue-haired brother rushes down the long hallway with several guards behind him. Jordy is in complete disbelief and cannot understand how things turned out like this. He remembers when his younger sibling was totally helpless, but now the boy is threatening his life. The second brother thinks about the secret spies he planted around the detached residence. He assumed his loyal servants would easily control the weak prince without any issues. But the current situation proves that his elaborate plan has completely failed. The stressed noble realizes that the weak boy has somehow taken full control over the mansion staff. His loyal allies try to calm him down by saying the report must surely be a mistake. They remind him that the cowardly prince is definitely too terrified to face him directly. Hearing their reassuring words, the second brother lets out a dark and confident smirk. Suddenly, a loud noise echoes through the room as the main doors are violently thrown open. Blood slowly drips from the dark leather whip after delivering a very harsh punishment. Stepping into the room, the second brother stops in his tracks as he beholds the shocking scene. The third prince stands calmly with his weapon, while the criminal holds the defeated woman down. Gritting his teeth with absolute rage, the blue-haired noble demands to know what is going on. Turning around with a peaceful smile, the young lord casually welcomes his unexpected guest. He politely asks his sibling to leave, because he is currently busy teaching a lesson about respect. The blonde master then commands his loyal helper to pick the crying maid back up from the floor. Losing his patience completely, the angry visitor orders his personal guards to rescue the woman immediately. Without hesitation, the two strong soldiers charge forward to complete their mission. Wearing a dark and sinister grin, the protagonist simply calls out his loyal giant's name. He declares that the maid will be eliminated on the spot if anyone dares to take 3 more steps. With glowing eyes, the cold prince adds that he will happily take full responsibility for her demise. Hearing this terrifying warning, the advancing soldiers freeze in their tracks out of pure fear. The massive helper assures everyone that the maid has absolutely zero chance of survival if they move. Feeling the sharp, cold metal pressed against her neck, the terrified woman does not dare to breathe. Tears stream down the face of the terrified maid as she desperately calls out for her savior to help her. Pointing his hand forward, the blue-haired noble screams at the guards to step away from the captive immediately. The angry brother threatens to eliminate anyone who disobeys and promises that their entire family will suffer for it. However, his loud threats fail to work, and he gasps in shock when his commands are instantly rejected. The giant warrior holds the sharp weapon close and calmly states that he only takes orders from the blonde prince. With glowing red eyes, the loyal fighter declares that his only duty is to carry out the commands of his true master. Trembling with intense rage, the sibling clenches his fist tightly because his authority has just been completely ignored. Trying to control his anger, the guest demands to know what the poor servant did to deserve such a terrible punishment. Smiling calmly, the young protagonist lists all her major crimes, including stealing money and ignoring royal commands. Glaring with sharp yellow eyes, the young master asks if his brother cannot separate public rules from private feelings. Gritting his teeth, the blue-haired noble is completely speechless because he cannot find any way to counter this logic. This family conflict is extremely dangerous because the main throne of the duchy is currently waiting for a new leader. Standing in the deep shadows, the eldest son Tristan is currently the first candidate in line to inherit everything. The second heir Jordi is his main rival, and their fierce competition has divided the entire household into two sides. To win this ultimate game, the blue-haired brother needs to gather as many loyal allies as possible before the final battle. Remembering his past defeat by the protagonist, the blue-haired noble grits his teeth in silent frustration. The guest realizes that losing his most loyal servant right now would destroy his remaining reputation. Dark doubts would quickly spread among his supporters if he fails to defend his own people today. Clenching his fist tightly, the brother fears he will end up completely isolated inside this massive house. Pointing forward, the angry brother demands that they release the captive woman this very instant. Glancing back nervously, his personal guards are far too terrified to take another step forward. Watching the intense standoff, a young servant nearby gasps loudly from the sheer tension in the air. With a sharp blade pressed against her throat, the terrified maid can only weep in silent agony. Standing calmly with his back turned, the young prince maintains total control over the entire situation. Smiling with a blood-stained cheek, the blonde boy asks if his sibling truly expects him to just forget everything. He points out that the woman destroyed valuable items and cannot simply escape her crimes with a few words. Glaring with a cold golden eye, the main character mocks the idea that noble words can erase actual laws. Shrugging his shoulders casually, the protagonist wonders why his sibling is making such an absurd request. The blonde noble explains that stealing from the imperial storehouse is a massive crime no one can escape. Looking down at the kneeling servant, the boy asks what the public would think if they let this crime slide. The blonde prince admits he wants to end this conflict quickly for his brother, but there is a major problem. Wearing a smug smile, the protagonist points out that he currently lacks any good justification to let her go. Clenching his fist with extreme rage, the second brother demands that his sibling stop playing around and speak plainly. While the terrifying weapon hovers near the weeping woman, the young master explains how thieves are normally treated. Smiling brightly, the young noble reveals that the maid must pay back several times the total value of the stolen goods. Meanwhile, inside the massive main castle, the powerful duke stands silently by the tall window to contemplate the situation. Reading the fresh paper report, the family leader seriously asks his loyal butler if the news about his sons is truly accurate. The butler politely confirms that he personally verified all the wild details of this report. He explains that the blue-haired brother had to pay 10 times the stolen amount as compensation. By recruiting a strong outsider, the younger sibling easily located and removed every single spy. As a result, the weak prince's residence has suddenly become the most heavily guarded place in the mansion. Suddenly, a gentle knock on the door interrupts their conversation before the large wooden entrance swings open. Stepping inside with a calm posture, the blonde prince announces that he received his father's sudden request. Turning around, the powerful family leader gazes silently at his youngest child standing before his desk. Looking at his father, the blonde boy immediately senses that the atmosphere in the room feels quite different. The duke directly points out that the young master made a very bold move against his sibling recently. Smiling casually, the boy replies that he merely taught a quick lesson to some disloyal servants. Tapping his fingers, the father remarks that this action completely ruined his older brother's public reputation. The leader then wonders if the young lord is truly ready to handle the heavy consequences of his actions. Hearing this, the young prince calmly answers that he will simply handle whatever comes his way. He explains that his actions were only meant to restore proper order and respect for the law inside the house. With a confident smile, the blonde boy adds that he must stand firm to protect their prestigious family name. The protagonist proudly declares that his decision was made solely to keep their noble reputation clean. Hearing these bold words, the powerful Duke suddenly closes his eyes and lets out a small chuckle. The father points to the family banner and explains that his son has every right to fight back against his brother. However, the leader warns that things will change if their conflict grows too big and hurts the family. The blonde lord gasps in total shock when his father suddenly declares he will support the second brother instead. The confused protagonist quickly asks his father to explain the meaning behind those unexpected words. Glaring back coldly, the Duke wonders why his youngest child is so surprised by this logical decision. The family leader points out that the second sibling has already brought massive success and wealth to the house. He coldly reminds the protagonist about the entire year he spent doing absolutely nothing but sleeping. The ruler explains that it is only natural for a leader to favor the successor who actually gets results. Touching his chin thoughtfully, the blonde boy begins to analyze the hidden threat behind his father's speech. The blonde boy calmly asks if his father is telling him to step over his brother to climb higher. Looking closely at his son, the Duke orders him to develop his strength and become an asset to the family. Standing behind his massive desk, the ruler adds that only then will the boy find the answer to his question. Staring silently, the young lord realizes his father is trying to create a sense of crisis to make him act. This clear warning means the selection of the next leader of the family will happen very soon. A mischievous smile appears on the protagonist's face as he understands he must act before his chance is lost. The young boy wonders if all fathers show this kind of strange concern for their children. Reaching inside his dark blue coat, the clever prince slowly pulls out a sealed white envelope. Attracting his father's attention, the blonde hero places his hand on the desk and prepares to speak. Slapping a document down, he asks what the leader would do if a massive move had already been prepared. Showing a confident grin, the young master boasts that his secret plan is actually incredibly massive. From across the bright room, the powerful lord immediately picks up the mysterious sheet to read the details. Veins suddenly pop on the ruler hand as he clutches the paper with immense force from pure shock. Looking up with wide eyes, the father demands to know if the shocking report in his hand is truly accurate. The blonde prince maintains a serious expression and assures his father that this is the absolute truth. He explains that they already captured the dangerous smuggler trying to distribute the illegal substance. The young master confidently invites his shocked father to verify all the details immediately. Suddenly, a massive wave of freezing blue energy fills the entire room due to the old leader rising anger. Clenching the paper tightly, the furious Duke curses the enemy noble for trying to ruin their peaceful lands. Feeling the heavy pressure of his father's power, the young hero realizes he might get crushed if he is not careful. Trying to ease the heavy tension, the clever boy calmly asks if he can share one more thought about the plan. He points out that the rival family will easily sacrifice a simple pawn to escape any official blame. Since the trade went through a third party, there is absolutely no direct proof connecting them to the crime. Watching his son closely, the proud Duke is highly impressed by the boy's sharp analysis of this complex situation. The young master notes that the culprits will only face mild financial losses if they proceed with normal methods. Showing a dark smile, the prince suggests they completely destroy the opponent's strength instead of playing nice. Standing before his father, the blonde prince prepares to lay out his entire master plan. The Duke leans forward and asks his young son to share his thoughts in full detail. Lucian confidently replies that he already found a perfect way to keep the enemies from escaping. He reveals that a key player from the opponent's side recently surrendered directly to him. This person is the same powerful warrior named Hugo, whom his butler mentioned earlier. The father is surprised to see how his youngest child anticipated all these complex moves. Tapping the desk, the Duke realizes the prince wants to use the traitor to set a reverse trap. Lucian nods and explains that the enemy would never expect their trusted elite to turn on them. He adds that he made things look normal to lure the main boss out of hiding very soon. Although the plan sounds solid, the family leader quickly points out a major problem. The ruler warns his son that he is betting everything on a street thug who cannot be trusted. He coldly explains that one can never make a successful move while relying on a liar. Hearing this warning, the clever protagonist merely responds with a mysterious smirk. The blonde prince explains that he is actually betting on the massive desire the warrior holds. Turning his back, the young master reveals that the fighter wants to become a famous knight in the empire. The strong combatant desires to etch his name into history and escape his low social standing forever. While the ruler finds this dream foolish, the boy calls it a goal that can drive a man crazy with passion. With a bright smile, the protagonist decides to trust this dream just like he did during his past life. Leaning back in his chair, the father comments that this is a highly emotional reason to trust someone. The Duke then asks about the consequences if the newly recruited warrior ends up ruining the whole plan. Showing a sharp golden eye, the young noble promises to take full responsibility even if it costs his life. The powerful leader stares in silence and seems very pleased with his youngest child's brave determination. Suddenly, the Duke tells him to visit the family training ground as soon as his body is fully recovered. The proud father announces that he will pass down the legendary sword and make him a true successor candidate. As the epic meeting concludes, we see the massive mansion where new dangerous battles are about to begin. Candles flicker softly inside the dim study as the deep conversation continues. The Duke stands near the tall bookshelves while his loyal helper waits quietly behind him. Bowing his head, the old servant admits that he feels deeply ashamed for failing to prevent this mess. With a sudden movement, the powerful leader shuts his book and tells the man to stop worrying. He explains that he was the one who sent the butler away to handle the intense border problems. The leader thinks it was simply sheer luck that his youngest child managed to uncover this sneaky plan first. The advisor points out that the enemy's main goal was likely to destroy the Duke's pride and royal standing. The father looks highly annoyed that a high-ranking noble would only care about his own safety. Changing the subject, the butler wonders about the mysterious warrior named Hugo who joined the young master. He mentions that the fighter was actually a top boss in the underworld, which makes this recruitment crazy. Hearing this, the powerful leader quietly repeats the word growth while thinking deeply about his son. The old Duke remains completely silent as he processes how much his child has actually changed recently. He knows that a ruthless underworld boss would never follow someone just because of some cheap promises. This means that the dangerous fighter must have seen a massive spark of true potential inside the young prince. The warrior clearly believes that this blonde noble is someone truly worthy of risking his entire life for. Inside the quiet library, the powerful Duke decides to open the secret path because his youngest son is finally ready. The loyal advisor smiles and asks who will become the sword instructor for the young prince. Without hesitation, the family leader reveals that he wants a legendary warrior named Sir Eisen for this job. Hearing that famous name, the old helper looks worried about disturbing the peaceful retirement of the master. Far away from the mansion, a mysterious beam of blue light shoots directly into the night sky from a deep forest. This powerful energy surrounds an old swordsman who is quietly meditating in front of his long blade. Meanwhile, back at the massive mansion, a loud scream of complete shock echoes through the hallways. The young servant boy has his eyes wide open as he tries to process this unbelievable news. Shaking the blonde hero, the brown-haired friend desperately asks if his master is truly a successor candidate now. The protagonist gets annoyed and tells his new helper Hugo to pull the crying boy away from him. The strong fighter easily grabs the noisy servant and lifts him up to restore peace in the room. Looking at the crying boy, the tall warrior mentions that the personal assistant of such a talented master must act better. Hearing those words, the young servant freezes in pure shock as he realizes he is considered the leader's right-hand man. The brown-haired helper suddenly blushes and proudly claims he is far from perfect while teasing his new partner. Watching the funny interaction, the prince smiles and notes how skilled the former crime boss is at managing others. Crossing his arms, the blonde protagonist tells his two allies that they deserve to hear the exciting news before anyone else. The young master knows his helper is incredibly gentle, but possesses a deep loyalty that keeps him standing during hard times. If the servant gains enough experience, he will eventually grow into the most reliable manager of internal family affairs. Turning his gaze to the tall fighter, the prince plans to pave a clear path for him to finally become an official knight. The prince envisions the strong fighter becoming a legendary knight who will serve as his ultimate weapon. Standing together on a high cliff, the young master decides to prioritize quality over quantity for his small team. Back in the room, the blonde boy tells his two allies that things are about to get much busier from now on. He admits that navigating this dangerous journey ahead is completely impossible to do entirely on his own. Looking at them with a soft smile, the prince explains that he can only complete his grand goal with their help. Clenching his massive fist, the tough warrior promises that he will never let his new master down during the battle. The loyal assistant raises his hand and cheerfully declares that they can definitely count on their teamwork. Later, we see the massive training ground nestled deep within the green mountains of the family territory. Walking up the grand stone steps of the fortress, the young protagonist prepares himself for the harsh training. Inside the giant hall surrounded by bright fires, the blonde hero stands alone to prepare his mind for the challenge. Closing his eyes in deep concentration, the clever boy starts to remember some valuable secrets from his past life. During his previous existence, the protagonist traveled through freezing mountains to search for a legendary power. Resting by a warm campfire in the snowy forest, he searched for the ultimate essence of ancestral martial arts. He wanted to find the mysterious ancient methods that could elevate anyone's swordsmanship to a whole new level. Among those hidden techniques, he discovered the legendary advanced sword form, which holds unmatched destructive force. Despite struggling incredibly hard in his past life, the boy only managed to obtain some useless secrets. The treasure he found was definitely not the powerful advanced sword form he wanted so badly. He did not even get the intermediate manual that is usually reserved only for strong captains. Instead, it was just a weak version meant for beginner fighters, because nobles guarded the best skills. As a simple common mercenary, he was actually quite lucky to even touch any manual at all. Deep sadness filled his heart whenever he failed to protect his teammates due to his weakness. This painful helplessness only made him crave a genuine fighting style much more than before. Clenching his fist, the young prince realizes that a brilliant opportunity has finally arrived for him. He is about to learn an ancient style that completely crushes normal magic skills. This legendary technique is known as the Lionheart Sword and is kept secret by his family. The blonde boy wonders just how overpowered this legendary combat style will actually be. Suddenly, a surge of pure excitement hits him, making his heart beat much faster. Placing a hand on his chest, he admits that he is actually feeling pretty nervous right now. Since he arrived way too early, the excited prince has just been pacing around the empty hall. He decides to sit down and focus on his internal energy flow to calm his racing thoughts. Reflecting on his past life when he had no master, the young prince feels extremely grateful for this second chance. Sitting quietly in the center of the giant training hall, he waits patiently for his new legendary instructor to arrive. While birds fly peacefully across the blue sky, a massive shadow slowly approaches the training grounds. Resting his hand on the high railing, the gray-haired master watches the meditating boy and notices his solid focus. The teacher wonders what kind of trigger could have transformed a scared child into such a calm young warrior. In a flashback, the powerful duke meets with the legendary master to ask him to train his youngest son. Holding a cup of red wine, the family leader admits that he originally thought the boy had absolutely zero hope. Hearing that the boy possesses valuable talents, the old swordsman realizes this student might be truly extraordinary. The duke smiles while explaining that his youngest child possesses a truly surprising mindset. The old master listens silently and thinks he will finally judge the kid with his own eyes. This famous master is none other than the legendary sword saint named Eisenbrainter. A sword saint is basically a living god to other warriors because they reach the pinnacle of power. The protagonist stands in absolute shock as he realizes this legendary figure is right in front of him. Greeting the young noble warmly, the legendary warrior mentions that they have not seen each other in years. He formally introduces himself as the official new instructor starting from this day forward. The prince remembers being told about a loyal family knight, but his servant forgot to mention the guy was a literal god. Quickly showing respect, the young master bows deeply and says he is extremely honored to learn from the best. Chuckling softly, the old man waves his hand and claims that his legendary title is just a massive exaggeration. The teacher wonders why the future family head is bowing his head so easily to a simple old warrior. Looking serious, the blonde boy explains that he can never ignore proper manners when facing such a legendary master. He believes that this old warrior deserves the absolute highest level of respect regardless of their actual status. This unexpected show of absolute dedication leaves the great sword saint completely stunned by his student attitude. Feeling highly impressed, the old master warmly accepts the gesture and tells the young lord to act comfortable. Without wasting any more time, they both agree to begin the intense physical training session right away. Pointing outside, the gray-haired teacher calmly asks the prince to start running some laps around the yard. Dropping instantly into a perfect sprint stance, the blonde boy is completely ready to dash forward on command. The sudden reaction completely catches the old instructor off guard, making him yell out for his student to wait. The master wonders why the young prince is not asking any questions about the length or the purpose of the exercise. Smiling brightly, the boy replies that he fully trusts there is a fantastic reason behind every single command. He firmly states that a loyal disciple must simply follow their master orders without doubting their methods. Looking closely at the boy, the master realizes this child possesses a pure and honest passion for the sword. The instructor immediately agrees to start the session, and the young prince sprints out of the room at full speed. Standing on the stairs, the veteran knight watches the blonde boy run tireless laps around the dusty training field. While running, the clever protagonist reveals that he actually knows the secret meaning behind this simple exercise. He knows the master is trying to see if his potential disciple possesses the ultimate spark of a true warrior. The boy remembers using the exact same strategy back when he worked as a simple mercenary captain in his past life. By assigning a trivial task to new recruits, he could easily judge their real attitude and character in seconds. Continuing his run, the young prince glances back to make sure his legendary teacher is observing his great effort. Knowing the student has already shown a great attitude, the master watches closely to see if he has real grit. A confident smile appears on the blonde boy's face because he is completely ready to prove his absolute determination. Staring ahead with sharp eyes, the brave prince resolves to keep sprinting until his body literally collapses on the ground. One whole hour passes by and the blonde boy suddenly stops with a highly confused look on his face. Looking at his hands in shock, the boy realizes he does not feel tired, even though he ran at full speed the entire time. Pushing off the ground with his boots, the young prince notices a truly bizarre feeling with every single step. Instead of slowing down, he actually feels lighter and faster, as a strange energy begins to flow through his entire body. The boy wonders how this is possible since he only consumed basic nectar and barely did any real exercise until now. Swooshing past the grand stairs, the legendary instructor quietly observes the young lord moving at an incredible pace. The veteran swordsman only wanted to check the boy's basic fitness and never expected any high-level performance. Staring in disbelief, the old master admits to himself that this crazy situation completely defies all normal logic. The running prince does not sweat at all, while keeping his breathing as perfectly calm as a quiet lake. Clenching his fist against his chest, the legendary warrior feels a sudden jolt of pure shock from this discovery. The amazed instructor starts to wonder if the young noble has already unlocked a legendary state of meditation. Looking across the empty training ground, we see how this simple test has completely changed the master perspective. Slowly stepping onto the dusty field, the old master decides to halt the exercise. Shouting out loudly, the veteran instructor tells the young prince to stop running. Coming to a sudden halt, the confused blonde boy wonders why his teacher is stopping him so early. Glowing with a faint blue aura, the master points out that the boy is already using advanced mana. Looking extremely serious, the old warrior asks the young lord about his earlier morning routine. He wants to know if the boy was actually practicing a legendary technique instead of simple meditation. Turning his head slightly, the blonde prince realizes what his master is referring to. He calmly admits that he indeed used circulation because it helps him clear his mind perfectly. Hearing this confirmation, the legendary sword saint realizes his crazy suspicion was absolutely correct. Stepping closer, the old man asks for permission to check the young lord's physical condition right now. Grabbing the child's hand gently, the master warns him to stay perfectly still during the brief examination. A bright blue energy suddenly flows from the veteran hand straight into the boy body. Feeling the internal power of the child, the legendary swordsman widens his eyes in pure astonishment. The incredible discovery leaves the famous instructor completely frozen in absolute disbelief. Feeling the incredible flow, the master realizes the boy has already reached the absolute limit of mana circulation just like him. He is shocked to see that the young prince is actually going even further and opening a brand new path beyond his own level. Slowly pulling his hand back, the legendary swordsman looks at the child with a mixture of absolute awe and deep curiosity. Staring at his palm, the veteran warrior asks how long it has been since the young prince reached the final stage of his core. The blonde boy acts completely confused and asks what his teacher means by reaching the end of his circulation. Describing the sensation, the veteran instructor notes that the boy mana is as pure as fresh snow on a quiet winter field. He explains that the young noble core is perfectly shaped like a water wheel to maximize his energy efficiency. The master adds that this incredible state of power is something only a tiny group of lifetime warriors can ever hope to reach. A subtle smile appears on the boy's face as he internally celebrates being so close to a perfect state of completion. Since his secret is already out of the bag, the protagonist decides there is no longer any reason to hide his true powers. Looking at his own hands, he realizes this is the perfect moment to ask the legendary master about his unique condition. The boy knows that only a legendary sword saint can truly answer his deep questions about his unique condition. He explains that he started circulating his energy about 1 month ago, and his pathways were open from the very start. Hearing this unbelievable revelation makes the old master widen his eyes in absolute shock. The prince adds that he never felt any pain or annoying blockages, even though he heard those are completely normal. Turning around, the legendary instructor realizes this boy has easily achieved what took him several decades of hard work. He begins to wonder if those ancient myths about godly warriors splitting massive mountains were actually real. Facing his young student again, the old warrior decides to ask a highly serious and direct question. The master calmly asks if the prince would ever consider giving up his claim as the successor of the noble house. A cold breeze passes through the quiet courtyard as the sudden question hangs heavily in the warm air. The shocking proposal completely startles the blonde boy, who wonders why he must give up his prestigious position. Touching his chest in deep panic, the prince worries that some terrible hidden defect is ruining his inner system. Sensing the intense worry of his young student, the legendary instructor quickly clarifies that the truth is the opposite. He happily explains that the boy possesses a physical body that is literally the ultimate ideal vessel for a warrior. An incredible golden energy tree represents his potential to easily push both his body and mana way past their absolute limits. The veteran master explains that if the young lord focuses entirely on the sword, he will quickly achieve legendary heights. The master promises that reaching the legendary status of Sword Saint is finally within the young noble grasp. Looking at his hands, the boy realizes that his current physical body is even more insane than he ever expected. He recalls how hard he trained in his past life just to master a basic ancient technique on a distant mountain. Now he has a golden chance to climb way beyond that level and finally reach the absolute peak of the sword. Turning back to his master, the blonde boy asks if he must choose between being a successor and a sword saint. With a solemn expression, the old warrior confirms that doing both at the same time is simply impossible. Raising his hand, the veteran instructor confesses that he is almost 100 years old and his body is failing. He explains that his remaining time is short and teaching everything will require his student absolute focus. The clever prince remembers from his past life that this legendary sword master only has 8 years left to live. Although he wants to focus on training, the boy knows that the upcoming war cannot be won by sword power alone. The boy knows that only those with actual legitimacy survived the terrible chaos of his past life. Clenching his fist tightly, he prepares to make a very difficult decision, even though it hurts to do so. Standing in the quiet yard, the young noble tells his master that he wishes to remain a member of his family. With a calm expression, the prince politely declines the legendary offer because his family duty comes first. Hearing the refusal, the old instructor feels bad for putting his young student in such a tough situation. Looking down at the ground, the veteran warrior realizes his own selfish greed grew stronger as he grew older. Staring at the massive building, he admits that he simply wanted to leave some of his legacy behind in this world. The blonde prince stays completely silent for a moment before suddenly calling out to his master with a smile. This sudden shift quickly catches the old sword saint off guard, making him look back at the young boy with surprise. Pointing his finger up, the clever protagonist asks what the teacher would do if another true genius appeared. Meanwhile, the bright sun shines over a completely different part of the estate where training is happening. A majestic horse sprints down the path and easily leaps over a wooden fence with an incredibly skilled rider. The butler runs across the dirt field to deliver some urgent news about the third son. Pulling his horse to a sudden stop, the blonde boy asks if the ridiculous rumors are actually true. This angry teenager is Joshua Valdek, who is the fourth son of this prestigious noble house. Quickly jumping off his horse, the boy listens to the servant confirm that his brother is now a candidate. Hearing that his brother is training with the legendary swordmaster makes the young noble extremely angry. The furious young master realizes that even the neutral factions now have another option for succession. Throwing his cloth to the ground in sheer rage, the young lord refuses to accept this terrible news. The boy asks why his brother cannot just rot in his room while the servant begs him to watch his words. Grabbing the butler by the shoulder, the angry prince screams that his supporters might now start to waver. Even his horse looks nervous as the young master complains about his other sibling having a slight age advantage. Biting his glove in frustration, the blonde prince declares that he cannot just sit still and do nothing. Plotting a plan to stop his brother, the angry young lord realizes there must be a way to resolve this problem. Turning to the servant, he suggests that the newly appointed successor will soon need a sparring partner. Looking at the sweating butler, the furious young master demands the preparation of 2 sharp swords. Leaning against his horse, he demands actual steel weapons instead of harmless wooden training tools. Showing a wicked smile, the jealous prince decides to prove that nothing in this house has changed. Back at the courtyard, the protagonist wonders how his master would react if another true genius appeared. Although finding this person might take some time, he guarantees the candidate will easily surpass expectations. He explains that the potential student possesses a legendary talent that can leave a historic mark. This legendary legacy would easily endure for several hundreds of years into the future. Hearing this grand speech, the silver-haired instructor stays completely quiet for a moment. The veteran warrior worries that his own heavy expectations have accidentally placed a burden on his student. Smiling warmly, the old sword saint politely asks the young lord to stop worrying about this matter. Thanking the young noble for his kind words, the legendary master begins to walk away slowly. Looking down at his boots, the blonde prince realizes his bold claim probably sounded like complete nonsense. Since renowned fighters always fail to impress the master, it is natural for him to doubt a beginner. The young prince holds a mysterious smile because he knows exactly who this future powerhouse is. In his past life, there was another legendary figure with a different kind of supreme talent for fighting. This person had a weak physical body and only learned an incomplete style, but still became a monster. Whenever he entered the snowy battlefield, he easily cleared out entire armies of elite soldiers. The mysterious warrior defeated dangerous enemies in the blink of an eye with his supreme skills. This purple-haired genius was basically a living weapon who conquered the cold battlefield alone. People eventually called this unstoppable warrior the sword demon Felix. The protagonist plans to make this guy his strongest ally and the perfect successor for his old master. Back in the training courtyard, the experienced instructor decides it is time to start the actual lessons. The master tells him to perform 3 basic strikes on the wooden statue using his mana manipulation. The legendary master asks his student to show him a single strike infused with his pure mana. Gripping the wooden hilt, the boy realizes this is his first time holding a weapon in this new body. He decides to hold back a little bit because the original owner of this body already had basic training. Stepping forward with total concentration, the young prince prepares to show his true skills. Swiftly executing 3 clean strikes, the protagonist cuts through the air with absolute precision. For his final move, the young noble begins to channel his pure energy directly into the wooden blade. His eyes glow with a sharp golden light as his inner energy becomes incredibly dense. Releasing an intense burst of power, he strikes the heavy wooden target with a massive shockwave. Strong winds slowly clear away to reveal that the armored dummy is completely shattered on the floor. Standing in a cool pose, the blonde boy finishes his strike and waits for his teacher feedback. He feels his movements were a bit sloppy because this is his first time moving in this new body. Looking back at the veteran warrior, the protagonist wonders if the old man will become even more demanding. The master stays completely silent for a moment as he analyzes the performance with a very serious face. Breaking the heavy silence, the legendary instructor smiles and says his student has surprised him once again. Suddenly, the old warrior delivers a harsh blow by calling the performance completely pathetic. The unexpected criticism leaves the young noble totally shocked as he asks what his teacher means. The instructor calmly explains that the boy is actually full of terrible habits when swinging his weapon. He notes that the prince ignores the basic forms and swings like a mercenary who is only desperate to survive. Focusing only on power and speed throws off his balance and leaves massive openings in his defense. The sword saint asks how long the boy thinks it took to infuse his wooden blade with energy. Thinking back, the student estimates that the whole channeling process took about 1 or 2 seconds. The old instructor points out that even a single casual second is way too slow on a real battlefield. Before the protagonist can react, the veteran master swings his wooden staff with blinding speed to teach a lesson. The veteran master holds the wooden weapon right against the boy's neck and warns him that a single second is enough to lose a life. Sweating heavily, the blonde prince is shocked because he did not even realize the wooden blade was already touching his skin. He remembers his past life where a single mistake on the battlefield would instantly cost a warrior everything. Accepting the harsh lesson, the young prince vows to correct his bad habits and focus entirely on improving his mindset. Hearing the humble response, the old instructor remains silent but feels pleased with his student's quick understanding. Walking slowly, the master explains that physical strength alone is never enough to defeat a truly experienced warrior. He notes that combining internal and external energies into a single smooth flow is the only key to achieving real power. To demonstrate this concept, the legendary sword saint swings his glowing weapon and cleanly slices through a target in a flash. Looking back at his shocked student, the veteran tells him that this is the difficult path he must master from now on. Several days quickly pass by as the young noble continues his intense training under the bright sun inside the courtyard. The training session continues as their wooden swords constantly clash against each other. The veteran master reminds the young lord that he should never interrupt his own flow of energy. He explains that perfect control over this energy must eventually become as natural as breathing. While reinforcing the entire body, the fighter has to keep some power ready to be sent anywhere. The experienced instructor watches closely while sharing these crucial secrets of weapon mastery. Listening carefully, the blonde boy leaps high into the air to unleash another powerful strike. The wise teacher easily blocks the sudden attack and continues his lecture about finding perfect harmony. Sliding across the dirt, the young prince tries to process these difficult concepts while keeping his balance. Catching his breath, the teenager grips his wooden hilt with a mixture of frustration and heavy determination. Observing this intense focus, the old sword saint feels glad that his student is pushing himself so hard. Suddenly raising his weapon, the master tells the boy to apply these rules and try to defend himself. The instructor decides to make the test more challenging by increasing his own power and speed. Rushing forward like a flash, the legendary warrior orders his student to read the incoming trajectory. Looking up, the young prince sees his master unleashing a terrifying green aura as he swings down. He remembers that the core of this legendary technique is about finding perfect unity with nature. This special flow helps to bridge any gaps in defense while minimizing wasted energy. Telling himself to stay calm, the boy focuses his mind and keeps his eyes fixed forward. Channeling a glowing blue power, he charges forward with everything he has. A massive explosion of light fills the entire courtyard as their powers finally collide. Gritting his teeth, the blonde noble struggles to push back against the absolute strength of his teacher. The veteran warrior looks completely relaxed, while effortlessly holding back the desperate attack. Another bright burst of force explodes between them as they test each other's limits. Watching every move, the sword saint analyzes how his student adapts during the intense struggle. Their weapons slide against each other with a sharp, screeching sound. Stepping back, the legendary instructor suddenly calls an end to the session for today. Smiling warmly, he says that remembering this exact feeling will make the boy an elite warrior. The protagonist can only laugh nervously while trying to catch his breath on the dirty floor. Steam rises from his exhausted body as he sits down, totally drained from the intense workout. Breathing heavily, the young prince looks up and politely thanks his master for the intense lesson. Looking at the destroyed courtyard, several servants quickly arrive to clean up the massive mess. The hard-working servants whisper to each other and wonder what kind of crazy training is going on. They also worry if their fragile young master can actually survive this brutal routine every day. Resting against a stone wall, the exhausted teenager smiles because he barely managed to survive today. Looking closely at his trembling hand, he realizes this harsh training is actually helping him. The protagonist understands that the old master is trying to erase his bad habits from his past life. Holding his battered wooden sword, the blonde boy feels glad that he is grasping the concept so fast. As he watches his master from a distance, the young noble feels incredibly impressed by his wisdom. The veteran warrior can perfectly read his body state to create the ultimate training experience. Just letting his body follow the training makes the blonde prince realize how fast he is growing. Before this, he thought sword forms were just about power, but now he finally understands the real value of flow. Gripping his training weapon tightly, the boy wishes he had known these secrets in his previous life. Memories of his past life suddenly appear, showing a powerful warrior standing on a foggy battlefield. This red-haired knight was his absolute rival who always ordered him to die during their intense clashes. Both warriors used to trade crazy blows as they locked blades with massive smiles on their faces. Coming back to the present, the young prince stares at his training sword and wonders if he could beat him now. He feels like ending his training day so early is a total waste and wishes he could find a good opponent. Sudden footsteps echoing through the hallway quickly catch the blonde teenager's attention. Looking up, he spots a familiar young man walking with a servant and wonders who this newcomer could be. The master watches silently as a voice politely asks how he has been doing lately. Greeting the old instructor with a bright smile, the fourth young master, Joshua, introduces himself. The master wonders what brings his young disciple to the training hall today. He politely asks the boy to come back later because the third young prince is busy training right now. While the nervous butler wipes his forehead, the old warrior asks for the real reason of this visit. With a suspicious grin, the newcomer states that his purpose is actually very simple. He explains that he wants to help his older brother practice because they rarely see each other. Turning his gaze toward the protagonist, the young man asks what his sibling thinks about this idea. Hearing this challenge, the main character slowly grips the hilt of his wooden sword. A creepy smile appears on the blonde boy's face because the perfect opponent has just arrived. An intense silence quickly fills the entire room as everyone waits for a response. The The wise master breaks the silence by asking what the visitor actually means by offering help. Showing a playful smile, the boy asks if there is a special stage to test their magic skills through a duel. He confidently offers to act as the perfect opponent for his older sibling today. Looking back at the main character, the teenager explains that they rarely get a chance to interact these days. Standing inside the room, the younger sibling politely asks the legendary sword saint to accept his sudden request. Watching this scene from behind, the blonde teenager thinks that the kids of this wealthy family are truly annoying. A strange smile appears on his face as he realizes how incredibly talented his brother is at using sweet words. The protagonist wonders how someone could randomly barge into a training hall and talk about helping him practice. He notices that the younger boy brought a real steel sword to fight a relative who barely started training. The goal behind this plan is completely obvious, since the kid just wants to look strong and secure his position. By using the excuse of helping his older sibling, the green-eyed boy believes nobody can accuse him of doing anything wrong. Having the powerful master watch over their fight would also make the outcome of this duel feel way more important. Feeling annoyed, the blonde prince notices that even this little kid is trying to push him away from the succession. The protagonist worries that refusing the challenge right now might make the situation very awkward for his teacher. With a confident stride, the young prince finally decides to step forward and end this silent tension. Walking toward them, the blonde teenager asks the veteran master to accept the proposal of his younger brother. With a sarcastic grin, he says that his sibling devotion is truly amazing and deserves to be rewarded. However, he adds that such rude behavior and cheap tricks should never be tolerated in a proper household. The prince promises to personally teach the little brat a lesson that he will never forget. Looking down at his younger brother, the blonde prince warns him to never put their master in a difficult position again. Watching them from behind, the veteran instructor realizes that the boy knows his brother's bad intentions. Sighing deeply, the wise teacher accepts their request because he understands that their stubborn bloodline cannot be stopped. Standing before them, the old man warns that this will be the final duel and he will stop it if things get too dangerous. Bowing respectfully, both young nobles quickly promise to follow his rules during their upcoming match. Leaning in close, the protagonist flashes a creepy smile while wishing his sibling a wonderful fight. Gritting his teeth, the orange-haired boy tries to keep his fake smile active while holding back his rising anger. Moving to the center of the massive courtyard, the two fighters stand opposite each other under the bright afternoon sun. Raising his voice, the veteran saint reminds them that this is only a simple test to verify their current progress. Turning to the protagonist, the teacher explains that he must use this first match as an opportunity to learn. Looking at the younger brother, the instructor adds that his longer experience gives him the duty of a proper senior. Hoping for a fair match, the old man tells them to fight with honor and avoid bringing any shame to their family name. Hearing the final instructions, both fighters slowly grip their hilts to prepare their weapons for the clash. Drawing their sharp steel blades, they face each other as a cold wind begins to blow across the empty courtyard. Glaring at his opponent, the younger prince wonders when his weak brother suddenly started acting so confident. Joshua feels incredibly annoyed that his older brother keeps talking down to him just because of birth order. Gripping his weapon tightly, the young boy decides to make his sibling shut up once the fight starts. His angry face reflects on the polished steel as he vows to prove who is the superior warrior today. Watching this happen, the blonde prince thinks his little brother is making an incredibly scary face. Holding the weapon, the protagonist feels the cold, heavy weight and realizes it has been 2 months since his last real duel. A quick memory of his past life flashes in his mind, showing how he used to fight dirty to survive. However, he decides to fight fairly today and act exactly like a proper young noble should. The boy knows that using his old combat styles would immediately make the watchful sword saint highly suspicious. Walking forward, he views his opponent as nothing more than an arrogant child who knows nothing of the real world. With a fake friendly smile, the younger brother asks why he is looking around instead of focusing. He mockingly wonders if the nervous blonde prince is finally starting to feel scared of holding real steel. The arrogant kid continues teasing him by saying dangerous accidents only happen between people of the same level. Hearing these foolish insults, the protagonist smiles darkly and decides to completely forget about holding back. The blonde prince flashes a scary smile while warning his opponent not to get hurt during this fight. Hearing this, the orange-haired brother gets incredibly pissed off by the sudden provocation. Stamping his foot on the ground, the angry kid charges forward to strike down his sibling with full power. Glaring intensely, the little brother vows to make the protagonist regret his arrogant words. Holding his sword, the main character realizes that teaching this brat a lesson while holding back will be tough. He knows his sibling was also trained by the legendary master and possesses highly refined movements. To make things worse, the blonde prince has already wasted a lot of mana during his previous training. However, he notes that the kid lacks real battle experience since he fell for such a simple provocation. Channeling his remaining energy, the protagonist starts applying the Sword Saint teachings on mana circulation. With a sudden burst of blue light, the blonde boy swings his blade to perfectly counter the incoming attack. The old master and the nearby servants watch the intense clash with their eyes wide open in pure shock. Joshua gets terrified as his older sibling tells him to brace himself so he does not bite his tongue off. A massive explosion of energy immediately shakes the entire courtyard as their powerful weapons clash together. When the thick dust finally clears, we see the younger sibling forced down onto one knee by the overwhelming pressure. Smiling down at his rival, the protagonist mockingly says that a real warrior should never drop to his knees so easily. Getting completely consumed by sheer rage, the younger brother screams for him to shut up and swings his blade wildly. Leaping backward to create some distance, the panting kid tries to convince himself that the last strike was just pure luck. Swearing there will not be a next time, the angry boy rushes forward, but the protagonist easily dodges the desperate attack. Charging forward with pure anger, the younger brother swings his sword, but the protagonist easily blocks the attack. The green-eyed kid shows a wild grin while the blonde prince remains perfectly calm and focused on the duel. Sparks fly everywhere as the two brothers begin exchanging rapid strikes at an incredible speed. Both young warriors grit their teeth as they pour all their strength into this intense family rivalry. The fierce sound of clashing metal echoes through the courtyard as neither of them wants to back down. Watching the match, the worried butler asks the veteran master if they should step in to stop this fight. He explains that the fourth young master has always been extremely jealous of Lucian and refuses to listen. The wise instructor calmly replies that the boy is just acting immaturely and will not do anything foolish. Instead, the master warns that they should actually be worried about what the older brother might do to him. The veteran sword saint closely observes the ongoing battle with a highly serious look on his face. Under normal circumstances, a giant gap in skill should make the match completely one-sided. Although the third young master was born with insane potential, he still lacks the experience to show it. Meanwhile, his younger brother only has average talent, but worked hard to achieve a sudden breakthrough. This means the current gap between them is simply too huge for the protagonist to overcome with mere luck. However, the hot-headed kid completely throws away his advantage because he cannot control his temper. The blonde hero calmly holds his ground while waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back. Watching his incredible composure, the master realizes the boy must have fully conquered his fears. Showing such confidence before a real blade means the youth is either extremely dumb or highly experienced. The teacher suspects his pupil possesses the dangerous mindset of someone who has already faced death. Folding his arms, the legend wonders how the neglected prince could develop such an intense spirit. A powerful shockwave suddenly tears up the stone ground as the battle grows even more intense. Beautiful sparks of white light fill the air while their blades clash at a blinding speed. The angry rival yells that his brother should have surrendered earlier instead of acting so stubborn. Blocking the wild swings, the main character realizes that his younger relative is actually enjoying this. Every single block sends a massive vibration straight through the protagonist's hands as he defends himself. He originally wanted to finish the fight with one single move by taking advantage of the kid's anger. However, the main character did not expect his sibling to be this good or his own mana to run out so fast. Without enough energy left to strengthen his body, the blonde hero finds himself in a very tough situation. Realizing his limits, the teenager decides to put everything on the line for one final exchange. Both brothers instantly throw themselves back into the action while their blades clash once again. Feeling the incredible pressure, the younger sibling wonders how his opponent can still find the power to fight. Observing the heavy sweat on his brother's face, the green-eyed boy realizes the teenager is completely exhausted. The arrogant kid smiles widely because he believes this is just the final desperate struggle of a loser. Raising his weapon high into the air, the orange-haired boy screams that he will end the match right now. With a wild look in his eyes, the greedy kid swings his heavy steel blade down with all his might. Facing the dangerous attack, the protagonist keeps his head low and remains completely calm. Glaring back at his enemy with sharp golden eyes, the blonde hero notes that this is exactly what he wanted. A giant shockwave immediately tears up the stone ground when the heavy strike hits the empty courtyard. Looking down at his stuck weapon, the younger brother is completely shocked that his ultimate attack missed. Staring in absolute shock, the orange-haired boy realizes his rival was actually smiling during the entire exchange. Standing tall, the blonde prince calmly points out that his foolish opponent swung without thinking of a follow-up plan. Smiling coldly, the teenager adds that his tired appearance was just a simple trap to lure the kid in for a strike. With a creepy grin, the main character mocks his sibling by saying this immaturity is why he remains the younger one. Gritting his teeth, the angry kid yells for him to save the lecture until after the match is officially decided. Trying to free his stuck weapon, the desperate brother grips the hilt tightly with all of his remaining power. Suddenly, a heavy leather boot steps directly onto the hilt to pin the weapon completely against the hard stone ground. Applying even more pressure on the captured blade, the protagonist calmly promises to end this right now as requested. Looking down with a highly unsettling smile, the blonde boy asks his sibling what he thinks will happen next. Feeling a sudden rush of cold fear, the younger prince can only look up while stuttering to ask for mercy. Under the bright blue sky, the victorious warrior raises his shiny blade high to deliver the final decisive blow. The blonde boy mocks his sibling for only calling him brother now that he is completely defeated. News of this unbelievable duel quickly spreads like wildfire throughout the entire royal mansion. Inside the halls, the servants cannot stop talking about how the weak prince easily dominated his brother. Two workers wonder if the rumor is true, since the older brother barely even touched a weapon before. In the kitchen, the maids whisper that the proud younger sibling returned from the courtyard, crying like a baby. Nobody realizes that these dramatic rumors are spreading so fast because someone is actively inflating the story. The curious staff stops a high-ranking officer to ask for the juicy details of what actually went down. Meanwhile, some maids corner a young servant boy to ask if the legendary sword saint truly praised the prince. The purple-haired commander realizes with deep concern that this supposed top-secret information is already public. With a bright smile, the young servant excitedly explains how the prince took the enemy weapon as a grand trophy. However, very few people in the estate actually know that this gossip is part of a clever master plan. Standing peacefully inside his private room, the blonde protagonist whistles a happy tune while enjoying his success. Licking his lips, the blonde prince happily notes that this is the perfect weather for rumors to spread around the estate. He remembers telling his defeated younger brother to consider himself lucky that the fight ended with only this much damage. The terrified orange-haired kid was crying and screaming that he was completely wrong while begging for mercy. Looking down with a cold expression, the main character decided to finish things by showing the true gap in their strength. With one swift movement, the protagonist swung his weapon down to deliver a devastating final blow. The heavy steel sword of the younger brother instantly broke into two pieces as it hit the hard ground. Leaning closer, the blonde hero warned the trembling kid that things would get very ugly if he ever pulled such a stunt again. Showing a terrifying smile, he told his defeated sibling to mind his own business and behave himself from now on. The scared kid could only nod his head rapidly while staring at the menacing eyes of his powerful older brother. Back in the present, the blonde prince realizes this victory will keep those annoying siblings quiet for a long time. Since his internal family problems are now mostly settled, the teenager turns his attention to a document on his desk. The young master wonders if he should finally start dealing with the dangerous house of Marquis Logran. A powerful hand suddenly slams down on a secret document inside a highly decorated room. The stern father asks if this is the top secret message that the protagonist received from his ally Hugo. Standing respectfully before his parent, the blonde boy calmly confirms that the information is indeed correct. The blonde prince explains that the enemy plans to make contact in Bester territory in exactly 1 week. Hearing this news, the father taps his desk while finding the bold moves of the enemy completely absurd. The young master adds that the location is close by, and the enemies think they are safe from any royal eyes. The stern ruler carefully listens and quietly notes that the targeted territory is indeed a blind spot. Since the task was already given to the prince, the father asks why the boy is reporting this back to him. Looking back with a serious face, the blonde teenager honestly replies that he currently needs more power. He compares the target to a trapped beast and admits he does not have the proper tools to hunt it down alone. A slight smile appears on the father's face as he realizes his son wants to borrow his personal resources. Looking down at his tea, the powerful man comments that this sounds like the youth is just riding on his back. The leader asks if the young prince truly believes everyone will recognize this success as a real achievement. Staring at his silent son, the lord explains that true hunters must always catch their prey using their own strength. The stern parent finishes by stating that the boy chose a safe path instead of taking on a real challenge. The father coldly asks if this is really the best his son can do under the circumstances. Staring down at the blonde boy, the powerful ruler demands a direct answer right away. Remaining completely calm, the teenager prepares a very clever response to defend his choice. Looking up with sharp golden eyes, the blonde youth says he will gladly take any path to finish the hunt. The stern father listens closely to his son's bold words with an incredibly serious expression. He explains that the supposedly honorable path is actually a luxury meant only for those who already hold power. Standing tall in the giant greenhouse, the hero argues that fighting alone is just reckless bravado. He believes that acting without proper planning only makes people lose their trust in the end. Walking slowly around the table, the boy notes that the real goal of a hunt is protecting what is important. Loosening his collar, the teenager says he does not mind if others call his success half-hearted. With a sudden playful expression, the main character clarifies that he does not intend to act like a weak saint. Reaching his hand down toward the flower bed, the young master gently touches a beautiful pink rose. Suddenly, he crushes the delicate petals in his palm while explaining his ruthless strategy. Letting the ruined pieces fall to the ground, the prince explains that the future of the estate is already decided. Hearing this mastermind logic, the powerful lord remains completely silent as he processes the plan. The powerful father calmly announces that this explanation is finally enough for him. Lifting his teacup, the ruler notes how long it has been since someone stood up to him like this. He praises Lucien for showing true conviction instead of backing down like a coward. Taking a slow sip, the lord adds that people who shake under pressure can never achieve anything. When the young prince wonders if this was all a test, the father confirms his suspicions. The ruler wanted to see if his son would blindly submit to authority or keep his own path. He believes that nobody would ever follow a leader who abandons his own beliefs so easily. Such a weak person is completely unfit to rule the family, let alone be called a real man. Listening to these words, the blonde hero sighs because his parent always makes things extremely difficult. The protagonist quickly asks if he will finally receive the proper support for this upcoming mission. Looking over the documents, the father agrees to provide the necessary tools to get the job done. He warns that sending a large force will only alert the enemy, so they must act in a small group. Laughing happily, the blonde boy requests a few skilled knights to assist him on his journey. With a very serious glare, the ruler promises to assign the legendary Black Lions to his command. He wants his son to experience the heavy burden of carrying the true power of their great house. Exactly 1 week later, the young master finally arrives at the desolate Vestra region, which looks like complete trash. Looking around the ruined streets, the blonde prince notes that the area is even worse than the terrible rumors. His loyal companion explains that this place became a total ghost town after losing its main trade routes. Despite the creepy vibes, the guide proudly mentions this abandoned city is actually the best spot for their base. Turning his head, the purple-haired commander wonders how the young prince already knew every single detail of his secret plan. Smiling under his dark hood, the boy stays silent even though his allies have no idea how he obtained the info. Looking down at his hand, the protagonist promises to explain everything only when the time is right. Changing the subject, the clever teenager asks if the traps for their enemies have been successfully set. Inside a dusty warehouse, we see several wooden crates that were perfectly arranged to feed the targets false information. Standing back outside, the helper confirms that the special item is ready, but they still lack enough manpower. Hearing this, the prince wonders if relying on his powerful father troops makes them look a bit weak. The knight immediately shakes his head and explains they absolutely cannot afford to make any mistakes today. Clenching his fist, the purple-haired warrior admits he is mostly frustrated by his own lack of strength. Looking at his master, the loyal soldier wishes he could do more to make the blonde prince shine on his own. Gently placing a hand on the shoulder of his ally, the young master reassures him with a comforting gesture. The protagonist calmly tells his loyal commander that he completely understands his feelings of frustration. He warns his friend not to let impatience ruin their long journey because they are just getting started. Smiling, the blonde boy laughs and says 30 is still very young, but Hugo reveals he is only 23. The commander adds that his age is actually not that far apart from his young master. This surprising news completely shocks the main character and leaves both of them standing in awkward silence. Sweating, the hero tries to fix the mistake while a flock of birds flies away above their heads. Looking around the area, the blonde teenager notes that the scheduled time is close, but nobody has appeared. Suddenly, both of them sense a powerful presence nearby and turn their heads in deep alarm. Reacting with pure instinct, the loyal commander draws his sharp sword and thrusts it forward to attack. A mysterious dark figure easily blocks the blade with his bare hand while calling the move way too slow. Sweating hard, Hugo realizes this man is insanely fast and holds the sword so tightly that it cannot move at all. The blonde prince calmly steps forward and tells his shocked commander to stand down because this man is not an enemy. Looking closely, the young master demands to know why this visitor is releasing such a massive amount of killing intent. The mysterious warrior suddenly releases the weapon and steps back to reveal his face as a member of the Black Guard. Staring in total disbelief, Hugo asks if these people are actually the legendary Black Guard reinforcements. This legendary shadow unit is known for completing the most brutal and secret missions while obeying only the family head. The young prince confirms this and introduces the powerful team as the elite hunters sent to help them with the mission. Walking forward with great respect, the powerful leader of the unit salutes and greets the young prince. The commander explains that his sudden attack was just a small test to measure the reflexes of the royal guard. The blonde hero silently recalls that this unit was so secretive in his past life that he doubted they even existed. The young prince realizes the terrifying rumors about this elite squad are not an exaggeration. Looking down, we see the legendary warriors hiding their presence so perfectly that nobody can sense them. The main character realizes each member of the unit is actually a terrifying monster. A wide smile appears on his face when he thinks about his father sending such a powerful group. The blonde teenager is incredibly grateful for receiving such amazing and reliable support from the ruler. Soon they gather inside a large building in the abandoned territory to plan their next move. Sitting at the center, the hero explains that the enemy has taken the bait and is heading their way. He quietly tells his allies that their main goal is to capture the mastermind alive. Looking up with fierce golden eyes, the boy gives permission to eliminate any other threat. The powerful commander of the unit agrees and leaves all the remaining decisions in the hands of the prince. Watching the young master, the warrior initially thought they were sent just to keep the boy's hands clean. He is completely surprised to see that the prince is behaving like a true ruler who prepares for everything. Placing his hand on his chest, the captain realizes the family might enter a legendary new era under this youth. The elite unit stands ready inside the warehouse as they prepare to execute the plan. Meanwhile, a luxurious carriage slowly approaches the desolate region during a beautiful sunset. The wooden wheels clank against the stone road as the vehicle enters the abandoned town. This expensive transport belongs to an influential noble family that is currently visiting the area. Inside the cabin, a purple-haired teenager yawns because he finds the long trip extremely boring. The spoiled kid complains that he would never visit this terrible place without his father's direct orders. Stepping out of the doors, the wealthy boy finally arrives at his destination. He wipes his mouth with a clean cloth while hoping to finish his job quickly so he can go home. This arrogant youth is Philip Logren, who is the second son of a very prominent family. The snobbish noble immediately complains that the air in this region is completely disgusting. Suddenly, a peasant wearing a dusty brown hood runs toward the group while apologizing loudly. Reacting quickly, the family guard draws his sword and warns the stranger to halt immediately. Shaking with fake fear, the traveler begs for mercy and says he was sent to guide them safely. A playful smile appears on his face, revealing that this guide is actually our disguised protagonist. The proud noble tells his knight to sheathe the blade, because speaking to peasants is beneath them. Under his dark hood, the young master smiles because this target is even bigger than he originally hoped. The arrogant noble walks into the dark building without showing even a tiny bit of caution or fear. Observing the boy's actions, the protagonist confirms this spoiled kid is definitely one of the Marquis' sons. The main character quickly counts the enemy guards and notes there are only about 12 of them nearby. He notices one extremely strong guard standing right next to the noble who seems like a real threat. The blonde hero also notices some maids, which seems like a very weird thing to bring to a shady meeting. Pretending to be terrified, the protagonist runs ahead and promises to lead them to the meeting room. While acting like a clumsy servant, the clever boy keeps a very close eye on their movements. Looking back at the maids, the blonde teenager suddenly feels a strange sense of familiarity from one of them. He quickly shakes the weird thought out of his head and continues his act without slowing down. Inside the dirty warehouse, the wealthy noble holds his nose and complains about the terrible smell in the room. The arrogant kid wonders if their local contacts stole their family money instead of keeping up the facility. Suddenly, a mysterious figure walks down the stairs and points out that the inside of the warehouse is what counts. Smiling warmly, the purple-haired man introduces himself as Hugo and welcomes the young noble to the site. Inside the big warehouse, The noble mockingly hopes that the commander has not planned any foolish tricks. The purple-haired commander replies that the secret reports must have really triggered the curiosity of the noble house. This secret deal involves a terrifying secret power that can completely destroy their entire kingdom from within. Handing over a powerful crystal would allow them to control everything and make their enemies crumble. Smiling widely, the clever commander promises to reveal this legendary treasure without wasting any more time. Watching the scene, the main character is highly impressed by how calmly his ally can lie to their target. Feeling deeply insulted by this attitude, the arrogant noble warns him about the terrible cost of failure. Looking around, the spoiled boy suddenly orders the disguised prince to go fetch the precious item immediately. Obeying the command, the commander tells his partner to bring out the special container they prepared beforehand. The two allies carefully hand over the glowing object while pretending to be simple business partners. Looking closely at each other, they share a quick silent look to confirm that the trap is finally set. Gripping the glowing blue vial tightly, the young master announces that he has the item ready in his hands. Suddenly, the disguised teenager moves with incredible speed and rushes directly toward the shocked noble group. Leaping through the air, he yells that he will make sure the delivery is completed right now. Raising his arm in pure panic, the arrogant noble screams while wondering if this servant has completely lost his mind. Suddenly, a sharp needle flies through the air and cracks the blue vial in an instant. A blinding light immediately bursts from the crack and completely covers the entire warehouse. The massive flash is so intense that both sides are forced to shield their eyes in total panic. Bright beams of energy even shoot out from the building and illuminate the dark streets outside. Lost in the complete darkness, the spoiled noble screams for his guards and threatens to punish them. Holding his head, the young master angrily asks why nobody is answering him until one guard replies. The boy desperately orders his team to protect him when a dark silhouette suddenly stands in front of him. The heavily injured captain tells his master to run because someone has unexpectedly betrayed them. Staring in absolute horror, the rich boy calls out to his leader while a dark shadow looms over them. The young noble freezes in complete shock as he tries to understand what is happening around him. Shadows move quickly through the dark room, and his guards start falling one by one without any chance to fight back. The elite warriors strike with perfect precision to take down the remaining defenders in a matter of seconds. Even the maids collapse to the ground while the terrified noble screams in horror as his entire world crumbles. The broken pieces of the expensive magic stone lay on the wooden floor after releasing that massive, blinding flash. Our disguised hero stands calmly next to his ally since they use this rare tool to steal the vision of their enemies. The entire defense force of the Marquis lies completely defeated near the entrance of the warehouse. The elite Shadow Knights completed this difficult task in just a single fleeting moment without any struggle. The powerful captain announces that all threats are neutralized, and they will escort the captives to their main base. A calm smile appears on the face of the young prince under his dusty hood as he watches the successful operation. He finally begins to understand the heavy words of his father about bearing the weight of his royal position. Kneeling on the cold floor, the spoiled kid desperately begs them to stay back while trembling with intense fear. He loudly boasts about being the fourth son of a powerful noble family, hoping his high status will save his life. The fierce commander looks down on him and orders the boy to submit quietly, because the Grand Duke will decide his fate. Sweat drips down the face of the terrified noble as he realizes his captors are from the legendary Valdek family. Looking up in absolute shock, the spoiled kid realizes that the lowly peasant helper is actually the son of the Grand Duke. Refusing to accept defeat, the arrogant noble screams for his guards outside to come and protect him immediately. The young prince calmly thinks that the battle is over until a desperate shout echoes through the dirty warehouse. The sudden shout catches the blonde protagonist completely off guard and makes his golden eyes widen in deep confusion. Pointing desperately at one of the maids, the captured noble commands her to take up a weapon and fight for him. Seeing the weapon on the floor, the young prince starts connecting the clues of her familiar face and name. Moving with unexpected speed, the quiet maid grabs the heavy sword and spins it around with perfect ease. Her grip on the handle is incredibly firm, showing that she is actually an extremely experienced warrior. Looking at her fierce gaze, the protagonist wonders if this girl is secretly the legendary sword demon. Trembling with fear, the spoiled boy crawls backward on the wooden floor toward the dangerous woman. Desperately grabbing her apron, the cowardly noble begs her to save him from this terrifying situation. He promises to give her absolutely anything if she can just manage to get him out of this place safely. The captive noble even promises to stop the insults about her family heritage if she protects him now. He angrily demands an answer since he believes her only purpose in life is to keep him safe from harm. Glaring coldly at the cowardly noble, the dark-haired maid tells him to shut up if he wants to survive. Gripping the heavy handle tightly, she raises her weapon and says she is sick of his pathetic behavior. Watching the scene, the commander finds it absolutely pathetic that the noble is hiding behind a maid. The tall warrior admits he respects her bravery but warns the girl not to throw her life away so easily. He adds that he is only showing mercy because she is a female and a mere child. With her eyes glowing a dangerous purple shade, the young woman asks if he is truly making that choice. Stomping his foot down, the powerful captain accepts her challenge and prepares to strike her down. Moving like a flash of lightning, the veteran warrior lunges forward with a massive overhead strike. Instead of dodging the attack, the mysterious maid simply smiles as her eyes lock onto the coming blade. Showing unbelievable speed, she shifts her stance in a split second to meet his heavy attack head-on. Sparks fly everywhere as their swords collide in a massive clash that shakes the entire room. With absolute focus, the mysterious maid moves her head to dodge the incoming blade. She easily avoids his heavy slash by spinning her body like a dancer in the wind. The captain gasps in pure disbelief as he fails to keep track of her fast movements. A sudden sharp sound echoes through the room when a quick strike cuts through the air. Landing gracefully on the floor, she shows off a reaction speed that seems to predict the future. Watching from the side, the young prince is completely stunned by her wild and unique combat style. Staring closely at the girl, the protagonist finally realizes her true identity without any doubt. He remembers the famous story about a legendary fighter known across the land as the Sword Demon. That warrior was famous for having an elegant look that did not fit the rough mercenary world. The prince understands she is actually an illegitimate child who disguised herself as a man named Felix. Meanwhile, the shocked captain holds his face and realizes he almost lost his head in that clash. Blood drips slowly onto the cold wooden floor after that extremely close exchange. Looking down at the ground, the captain admits to himself that he still has a very long way to go. He decides to swallow his pride and treat this mysterious girl as a truly dangerous opponent. A massive wave of dark energy suddenly bursts from the warrior as he prepares his next attack. Facing this overwhelming pressure, the disguised girl realizes her opponent is far stronger than her. Looking up, she notices another powerful fighter standing on the balcony above her. She even senses a mysterious presence that is way stronger than everyone else in the room. Knowing her chances of survival are basically zero, the brave maid prepares herself for the end. Since this might be her very last strike, she decides to fight with everything she has left. Watching from the railing, the spectators are highly impressed by her calm and steady attitude. The veteran commander grips his weapon tightly while feeling the intense mood in the air. Another drop of blood hits the wooden floor as the silence in the warehouse deepens. Moving with incredible speed, the angry captain leaps forward to end the battle once and for all. Their weapons clash with a loud sound that echoes through the entire building in a flash of light. Bright beams of colorful energy explode in every direction as the two fighters pour all their strength into the clash. Both warriors lock eyes with absolute focus while trying to overwhelm each other in this intense duel. Their swords scrape against one another with a high-pitched sound that threatens to shatter the wooden floor. Suddenly, a loud voice echoes through the warehouse, commanding both of them to stop their fight immediately. The sudden interruption completely shocks the two fighters and forces them to pull back their weapons. Stepping into the light, the young prince demands an end to the battle with an extremely cold tone. He slowly walks down and declares that he will absolutely not tolerate any more useless bloodshed in this place. The gray-haired commander objects because he believes letting this dangerous girl live will create a massive threat. Glaring coldly at his captain, the young prince asks if the warrior has forgotten who gave him his authority. Raising his hand, the blonde youth says he understands the danger, but refuses to let this end in death. Finally revealing his true identity as Lucian Valdek, he offers a surprising deal to the mysterious girl. The young prince steps forward and proposes a duel between them to settle this conflict peacefully. He promises to let her walk away if she wins, but demands her total surrender if he defeats her. The spectators whisper in confusion while the confident protagonist wears a very calm smile on his face. Sweating from the sudden pressure, the disguised girl wonders why this young master wants to fight her. Behind her, the captive noble instantly yells at her to accept the generous offer without any hesitation. He keeps shouting that her only job is to protect his precious life from all these scary enemies. Looking at his fallen soldiers, the selfish noble calls them useless trash who failed to do their duties. He demands she prove her worth and insults her mother with extremely harsh words to force her into action. A freezing voice suddenly tells the noisy coward to shut up, which makes him freeze in absolute terror. Standing tall, the protagonist declares that those brave guards who died protecting him deserve actual respect. Glaring with glowing golden eyes, the angry prince threatens to cut out the loud noble's tongue if he barks again. Turning to his men, the young leader loudly takes full responsibility for everything that happens next. He asks everyone present to honor his promise, even if he somehow ends up losing this upcoming battle. Staking his prestigious family name, the brave young master finally challenges the mysterious maid to a duel. The young prince calls the girl by her real name and tells her to draw her weapon for her own sake. Standing in the center of the dusty room, the two opponents face each other as the tense atmosphere builds. Watching from the side, the silver-haired warrior asks the captain if they should really just stand there and observe. The veteran admits that the mysterious maid managed to hurt him, even though he was not using his full power. Analyzing her movements, the warrior notes that she lacks any formal training with a blade. Her raw talent and sharp instincts easily make up for any missing lessons from a professional teacher. Seeing the youth prepare to fight the silver-haired man, believes the young master stands zero chance of winning. He urges his companion to step in because bravery alone cannot save their leader from a skilled opponent. Agreeing with the worry, the captain still decides to wait and observe what the young master is planning. He reveals a surprising detail about the moment the blonde youth borrowed his weapon for this battle. It turns out the prince had already noticed the girl's extreme talent and sharp instincts before anyone else did. Hearing this, the silver-haired warrior realizes the young leader fully understands the danger of this duel. With a calm expression, the captain suggests they watch closely to see what kind of plan the prince has made. Sunlight streams through the high window as the tense silence fills the massive wooden room. Hearing his real name, the maid realizes this young prince is completely different from any noble she ever met before. She wonders why he disguised himself as a common servant just to inspect the forces and then offered this strange duel. Although his true plan is still a mystery, she is absolutely confident that the young master cannot defeat her. Bowing her head, the disguised girl thanks him for giving someone of her low status such a fair chance to survive. The blonde youth replies that she will have to follow him to his territory if he manages to win this battle. Standing at a distance, the two opponents confirm their terms and prepare to test their skills against each other. Gripping their weapons tightly, the fighters lock eyes as the heavy tension in the warehouse reaches its peak. Looking at her opponent, the young woman decides to end this fight in a single move without causing him any serious harm. Her purple eyes glow with intense focus while she prepares to launch her ultimate attack. A massive wave of energy suddenly bursts around her body as she unleashes her incredible speed. Leaping high into the air, the legendary fighter attacks the calm prince like a shadow falling from the sky. Sweeping forward with a massive strike, the confident girl gets a huge shock when she looks closely at her opponent. With a very calm expression on his face, the young prince easily blocks her powerful blade using his own weapon. Refusing to back down, she leaps into the air and unleashes another fast strike that sends bright sparks flying. She spins her body like a dancer to build up momentum for another devastating follow-up attack. Sweat runs down her face as she wonders how this weak noble is easily keeping up with her legendary speed. Their metal weapons collide once more with a loud ring that echoes throughout the entire warehouse. The young master applies heavy pressure and begins pushing the legendary warrior backward with ease. The blonde youth points out that she is already exhausted from her previous fight against the elite guards. Looking up at her opponent, the girl realizes the massive power gap between them is simply too wide. The protagonist actually remembers her combat style because they crossed swords once in a previous life. During that brief but intense encounter, they both learned each other's secrets and perfected their skills. The prince feels a deep connection to her moves as a sharp piece of metal suddenly snaps off and flies through the air. The elite guards and the commander watch in absolute disbelief as the intense clash reaches its sudden end. While the shattered metal falls to the ground, the cowardly noble trembles with pure fear after seeing the result. A memory flashes of the time when the legendary warrior once taught him how to handle a sword in a past life. She did this even though there was a big chance they would eventually face each other as bitter rivals. Thanks to those old lessons, the blonde youth survived his past struggles, and now the broken piece hits the floor. The young prince holds his sword directly at her neck, showing that he has won the duel fair and square. Out of breath, the disguised girl stands completely frozen while realizing she has been totally defeated. Looking down at her, the protagonist quietly says that this victory pays back a small part of his old debt to her. Later that same night, the scene shifts to a massive and luxurious mansion standing under a bright full moon. Standing on the high balcony, a powerful lord asks for a secret report about how the young prince performed in the battle. The powerful lord looks at the moon and wonders if the young prince can truly carry the future of the family. Keeping his eyes closed, the loyal captain confirms that the boy possessed an incredibly strong and unwavering core. Looking down from the balcony, the noble leader admits that he never expected to hear such positive news about the youth. The experienced warrior bows deeply after the ruler states that it is still too early to decide who will take the throne. Accepting the apology, the master says that the reports of the battle show that the prince put on quite an impressive show. Holding the report tightly, the ruler stares into the distance while planning his next move. He decides to humor the boy for a while, because his trusted commander has put so much faith in the young master. Putting his hand on the captain's shoulder, the lord invites him to share a drink after a very long time apart. He adds that he has prepared a special vintage wine that is guaranteed to suit his old friend's taste perfectly. With a warm smile on his face, the captain says that his master might quickly regret making such a generous offer. He warns that a single night will not be long enough to explain every incredible detail of this successful mission. As the morning sun rises, a group of skilled riders journeys through the forest on their way to the next destination. Riding his horse at the front of the pack, the young prince enjoys the quiet journey with a peaceful smile. Right after their battle ends, the young maid collapses from extreme exhaustion due to her heavy mana usage. To help her recover, the young prince quickly sends her away to a nearby city with her close companions. Meanwhile, the cowardly noble starts shaking because he is absolutely terrified of how his father will punish him. Deciding to teach the arrogant boy a proper lesson, the blonde youth prepares a very fitting punishment for him. He forces the spoiled young master to dig graves for his fallen guards with his own 2 hands through the night. The exhausted noble kneels on the dirty ground, while hoping he finally understands the real weight of a lost life. The next morning arrives, and the protagonist rides his horse through the forest with a very peaceful expression. Behind him, the captive noble continues to scream in pure rage about the betrayal he experienced from his own ally. He demands to be treated with proper respect as a prisoner of war since he belongs to a highly prestigious family. The captured boy even yells that the young prince is making a massive mistake by creating a dangerous enemy. Listening to the loud complaints, the prince realizes the spoiled boy learned absolutely nothing from his punishment. Turning around with a very calm look, the blonde youth offers a single piece of advice to his noisy captive. He quietly warns the captive to watch his mouth if he wants to keep breathing for even a single second longer. The young leader adds that this is a dangerous territory where the boy's powerful father would never dare to step. They finally arrive at the edge of the cliff, overlooking a massive city known as the legendary heart of his family. Slowly, the massive wooden gates of the city swing open as the young prince finally makes his grand entry. Both the young leader and his loyal commander look around with wide eyes as they step inside the city walls. A massive crowd of excited citizens lines up along the streets to cheer loudly for the returning hero. People shout his name in pure joy and wave their hands to get a quick glance at the third young master. The happy citizens even call the young prince the legendary lion of their prestigious family house. Completely shocked by the loud welcome, the veteran captain asks his leader what is actually happening. Smiling softly, the blonde youth explains that his powerful father has decided to grant them his full support. He turns to his loyal companion and tells him to stand proud while accepting this grand celebration. The prince adds that this is a well-deserved honor for the first major achievement they made together. Confidently, they ride their horses through the crowded streets, while the people throw colorful petals. High up on a stone tower, 2 powerful figures look down at the massive parade with serious expressions. The duke chuckles and says that he must be getting old to throw a massive festival just because his son asked. His trusted advisor smiles and replies that the young prince truly accomplished something grand enough to earn it. Looking at the official paper on the table, the advisor notes that the prince is not just trying to secure his power. The advisor explains that this festival sends a powerful message to their dangerous rivals. He adds that the suspicious movements around the empire are becoming extremely alarming. Even the royal crown, which once seemed immortal, might eventually break under pressure. Signs of trouble are also starting to appear on the family crest of the proud lions. Riding his horse, the blonde youth resolves to train much harder to survive the coming storm. Entering his luxurious new bedroom, the tired prince immediately throws himself onto the soft mattress. Knowing he has some free time before meeting his father, the protagonist decides to rest. Staring at the ceiling, he smiles while realizing this mission brought him incredible rewards. First, he managed to recruit the highly talented maid much faster than he originally planned. The Grand Victory Parade also helped clear his bad reputation among the local citizens. This massive success now provides the loyal commander with great motivation for his next steps. He even succeeded in forming a valuable connection with the legendary group of warriors. All these achievements act as perfect stepping stones to help him reach the distant throne. Thinking about his bright future, the clever youth lets out a very satisfied grin. A quiet campfire burns in the dark woods while a group of warriors rests around the glowing flames. One of the fighters smiles warmly, while the cloaked figure wonders how his enemies would react to seeing him like this. Shedding his deep thoughts, the young noble sits up on his bed and decides it is finally time to make his next move. A confident smile appears on the face of the blonde youth as he prepares for the upcoming meeting with his father. Meanwhile, the exhausted maid receives some medicine to recover her strength after the intense battle she survived. The protagonist knows he can use this massive victory to gain incredible favors from the powerful leader of his family. Bright chandeliers light up the massive dining hall, where a grand feast is prepared for the successful young master. Sitting at the table, the Duke reveals that the captured prisoner is indeed the son of their powerful rival. The experienced ruler proudly states that his son has secured the absolute best piece of evidence against their enemies. Hearing the high praise from his strict father, the young noble humbly replies that he is truly honored by the kind words. He explains that this great success was only possible because of the elite soldiers sent to support his dangerous mission. Taking a quick bite, the blonde youth asks his father what will happen to their captive enemy now. Holding his wineglass, the Duke calmly states that the rival leader will definitely try to save his own son. The cold leader mutters that they will have to wait and see how the desperate rival responds to this massive threat. He knows that their opponent is a highly dangerous man who values his status way more than the life of his own child. Staring coldly, the Duke states that having a single strong heir is more than enough to carry on their legendary family line. The leader swirls his expensive red wine before asking what kind of reward the boy desires for completing the mission. The father adds that his son surely expects much more than a simple victory parade to celebrate his successful return. Scratching his head with a sheepish smile, the blonde youth admits that he will speak freely since his father brought it up. He happily explains that his loyal companion Hugo played a massive role during the intense fight to secure their victory. Suddenly, the Duke cuts him off with a flat refusal, leaving the young master completely frozen with shock. Cutting his steak, the father easily guesses that his son wanted to request a prestigious knighthood for the former enemy. He points out that the helper previously worked with their rivals and cannot be trusted so easily despite his recent aid. Plunging his fork into the meat, the prince argues that his helper cooperated fully and achieved some great results. The reflection on the sharp knife reveals the cold eyes of the master as he calls his son by his name to quiet him down. Slamming his hands down, the leader declares that a true warrior must earn his own honor through undeniable achievements. Though the protagonist expected this strict response, he still feels a bit disappointed that his plan did not work out. Instead of a title, the Duke offers to give chests full of gold or even prepare a brand new identity for the helper. Pointing out the timing, the Duke states that the helper cannot become a knight just yet. Bowing his head, the young prince agrees and silently promises to make it up to his loyal friend later. The experienced leader then suggests that his son should ask for a much simpler reward instead. A mischievous smile appears on the face of the blonde youth as he prepares to make a different request. With a sharp look, he asks his father to let the newly recruited maid meet the legendary sword saint. Hearing this unexpected demand, the powerful ruler completely freezes in utter shock. Deep within the beautiful estate lies a highly secured area used specifically as a prisoner camp. Inside one of the private rooms, the purple-haired maid sits quietly on her soft bed. She looks around in confusion because this luxurious place is actually a special prison for nobles. Looking at the fresh food and warm medicine on the table, the girl wonders what the family truly wants from her. Clasping her hands together, the young woman decides that staying in this clean room might actually be a good thing. Closing her eyes for a moment, she remembers the dark days of her painful past. The captive feels incredibly relieved to have escaped that terrible place before her life was completely ruined. Staring blankly at the wall, she quietly wishes to hold a sword just one more time before her time is up. A broken blade falls to the floor as the purple-haired girl remembers clutching the shattered weapon with trembling hands. Her memory drifts back to the moment she faced the young prince and collapsed on the ground after their intense duel. Sitting quietly on her bed, the young woman realizes she desperately wants to clash blades with him at least one more time. Suddenly, the door handle clicks, and the blonde leader enters to check on her health after hearing the doctor's report. Leaning against the wall with a confident smile, the youth asks if she is already feeling well enough to hold a weapon. Wide-eyed with surprise, the maid stammers out his name while wondering what the young noble actually means by his question. Stepping further into the room, the protagonist playfully jokes that prison life seems to suit her a bit too well. The blonde youth grabs a piece of fresh bread from the table and takes a bite while explaining his true goal for her. Gesticulating with the half-eaten bread, he gets straight to the point and asks if she wants to train her skills here. Looking down with a very serious expression, the young master declares that he will never let her remain a mediocre fighter. The prince shocks the girl by offering to recommend her as a direct disciple to the legendary sword saint. Biting her lip in anger, the purple-haired maid asks if the young noble is simply mocking her. She yells that the mere idea of a female maid learning the sword is already completely absurd to her. Dropping to her knees, the captive sadly states that she knows her place despite her low birth. Looking at her reaction, the blonde youth realizes he was way too hasty with his grand proposal. He knows she faced terrible abuse from her family, who never allowed her to touch a weapon. The young master calmly explains that he wants her to think it over and decide everything herself. Turning around, the clever youth states that the freedom of choice is entirely in her hands now. Walking toward the exit, the prince mentions he might leave today and asks her for one small thing. He tells her to never give up on her weapon, which makes her eyes tremble with intense emotion. The prince adds that she looks the most like herself whenever she is holding a powerful blade. These words deeply affect the girl, who remembers how her own family stole her dream away. A single warm tear falls onto her clenched hand as she struggles to process her deep emotions. Standing up quickly, she calls out to the youth and asks if she truly has the right to chase that dream. Tears stream down her face as she wonders if she can really focus on the weapon without any worries. Hearing her strong determination, the young master gladly accepts her choice and swears a solemn vow on his own name. This emotional moment reminds the youth of a past conversation with his companion about their deepest desires in life. Back then, the dark-haired fighter smiled and said he only wanted to dedicate his entire life to the way of the sword. Soon after, the prince guides his companions through the massive training hall to begin their special preparation. The blonde youth suddenly stops in his tracks when he spots a very familiar figure standing quietly ahead of them. The powerful duke reveals that he could never miss such an important meeting with the legendary sword saint himself. Seeing the legendary leader, the nervous maid and the big helper immediately bow their heads in deep respect. Turning his sharp gaze, the strict father mentions that he already heard about the helper's great combat skills. But the ruler quickly adds that those great achievements cannot easily erase the heavy weight of his past mistakes. The duke reveals that the young master gave up his own reward to ask for a knighthood for his companion. Hearing this, the loyal companion gets extremely shocked, realizing his master truly meant to keep his word. Standing on the balcony, the leader explains that he denied the request because the fighter is not ready yet. He advises the warrior to gain more achievements so the family can personally guarantee his future honor. The strict father looks closely at the fighter and says he eagerly awaits the arrival of that great day. Feeling deeply motivated, the loyal warrior proudly swears to live up to these high expectations. Turning his attention to the purple-haired girl, the ruler calls out her name to test her resolve. He points out that she should know exactly how much the young master is risking for her sake right now. The duke warns that if she fails to prove her worth, her master will look like a fool blinded by desire. He sternly asks if she thinks she is worth that much, leaving the poor girl trembling in total silence. Suddenly, the blonde master steps in and confidently offers to answer the difficult question for her. Looking directly at his father, the youth declares with a bright smile that she is worth more than enough. He admits that others might call him a fool, and even the girl herself might still have some doubts. Staring ahead with determination, the clever prince says that all of those doubts will finally end today. He wants everyone to see that she is a rare diamond who was only held back by her background. Nudging his quiet helper, the blonde youth whispers that she must quickly speak up with absolute confidence. It turns out that the powerful father was waiting there specifically to judge the allies his son chose. The leader wanted to support his child during his first real attempt to rise up and gain power. Taking a heavy step forward, the ruler tells them to get ready because they will now face the legendary master. Bowing respectfully, the protagonist thanks his parent while keeping his secret ambitions hidden deep inside. They soon arrive at a massive outdoor training arena where a distinguished elderly warrior slowly approaches them. Caressing his white beard, the powerful master laughs and admits he came because he was highly curious about this event. The Duke asks the old fighter to judge the girl without mercy, which is exactly what the young prince expects. With a confident smile, the youth knows that only a strict test will prove the true value of their promise. Looking at the girl, the legendary sword saint agrees to start, since both the master and his father insisted on it. Seeing his intense gaze, the purple-haired girl begins to sweat and feels the heavy weight of the moment. With a serious expression, the veteran warrior promises to handle this test with absolute seriousness. A strong gust of wind sweeps across the empty stone arena as the tension rises to its peak. Standing right in the middle of the massive training grounds, the two fighters face each other silently. The girl feels the entire atmosphere shifting around them, just from being near such a powerful figure. Bowing politely, the young maid states that meeting such a famous master is a massive honor for her. When she tries to introduce herself, the older warrior suddenly turns away and cuts her off mid-sentence. Raising a simple training weapon coated in bright green energy, he coldly states that her name is not important. With incredible force, the old master plunges the wooden sword deep into the solid stone floor. He challenges her to draw the weapon, saying she must let her own skills speak for her identity first. Up on the balcony, the young prince and his father watch silently as the official trial finally begins. The blonde youth notices that the master compressed his energy to drive the blade incredibly deep into the ground. He knows raw strength will not be enough to pull it out unless she properly circulates her inner energy. Gripping the wooden hilt, the maid tells herself that this unique chance is her only way to prove her worth. Focusing all her inner power into her hands, the maid mimics the technique she saw her friend use before. With a sudden burst of energy, the girl successfully pulls the weapon out of the stone without any trouble. Smiling brightly, she holds the wooden blade and asks the legendary warrior what her next task should be. The old warrior remains completely silent before coldly stating that there is no need to see anything else. This sudden rejection deeply shocks the maid, who explains that she simply followed his exact instructions. Grabbing her wrist, the veteran master explains that she completely ignored proper circulation out of fear. Up on the balcony, the young prince watches the harsh evaluation with a very serious expression on his face. The veteran states she has raw talent, but she must go back to her teacher and learn how to listen first. Looking down in shame, the girl quietly admits that she never actually had a teacher to guide her. Tears well up as she confesses that she was only mimicking what she saw without knowing anything about mana. She grips the wooden sword and desperately begs the legendary master to teach her everything from scratch. Hearing this, the old warrior gets completely shocked and wonders if she really understood mana all by herself. Looking down, the maid explains that she only mimicked the blue energy she saw during her brother's fights. She adds that she could feel the change in the weight and speed of the sword whenever the energy pulsed. The master thinks this is absolute nonsense, because nobody should be able to see internal energy without touching. He realizes that using sheer willpower to draw out mana is impossible and wonders who this girl actually is. Up on the balcony, the smug young master smiles because his grand prediction about her talent is coming true. The prince previously promised to bring back a literal masterpiece of talent who has unlimited potential. Suddenly, the atmosphere gets incredibly tense as the veteran warrior decides to test her skills personally. Standing firmly in the middle of the arena, the old man prepares to face the young girl head-on. Holding his simple wooden blade, the sword saint watches her movements with extremely sharp focus. With burning determination in her eyes, the brave maid charges forward without showing a single hint of fear. Moving like lightning, she unleashes a swift strike that cuts directly through the cold air. Bringing her weapon down with all her might, she targets the legendary warrior in a desperate move. A loud sound echoes across the stone grounds as their wooden swords collide in a powerful clash. Looking down at her, the veteran master coldly points out that her movements are completely filled with waste. The legendary warrior wonders if her massive desperation is only worth this tiny amount during their intense fight. Easily blocking her desperate strike, with a single hand, the older fighter forces the girl to slide back on the stone. Breathing heavily, the exhausted maid realizes she pushed her body to the absolute limit without even touching him. Staring ahead, she realizes the powerful sword saint represents an untouchable peak that she cannot even hope to measure. Narrowing her eyes with fierce determination, the brave maid silently vows that she will never roll over and give up. A giant stone block suddenly flies up into the air as the immense pressure of their battle shatters the arena. Leaping forward with everything she has, the purple-haired girl unleashes one final strike directly at her target. The wooden blade hits the hard stone floor with a massive flash of blue energy. A giant shockwave rises into the sky, but the old veteran stands perfectly still in the middle of it. Looking at her, the master recognizes a strong spirit that refuses to break even when facing a massive wall. Encouraging her, inside his mind, the older warrior tells Felicia to pour out all of her hidden resentment. With a calm gesture, the white-haired master easily deflects her frantic attack using just one hand. A thin red line of energy suddenly appears to measure the perfect path of her next desperate blow. Lunging downward with a fierce expression, the brave girl swings her wooden blade with everything she has left. An immense red aura, shaped like a roaring lion, appears behind her to represent her sleeping potential. Her eyes widen as a dark silhouette from her past memories flashes in her mind during this intense struggle. Gritting her teeth, the determined maid continues to push past her physical limits to make her final attempt count. Felicia lets out a loud battle cry as a wild surge of power begins to overflow from her body. Watching her strike, the old master feels a small smile form on his lips just before a giant explosion of light covers them. Up on the balcony, the young prince and his father quietly look down at the massive dust clouds settling over the arena. The stern leader breaks the silence by asking his son if he knows what makes a swordsman truly reliable. He explains that a real warrior is someone who carries the heavy weight of painful training deep inside their soul. It takes endless repetition and mastering the basic skills over and over again to build such a solid foundation. True strength is forged on dangerous battlefields where even a single mistake can quickly end a person's life. The Duke stares forward and mentions that he has only ever allowed those battle-hardened warriors to stay by his side. But then he admits that some rare geniuses can skip all that hard work and leap over mountains of effort in an instant. He describes them as rare monsters who shine like a scorching sun, with talent that can swallow everything like a tidal wave. The Duke realizes that some rare geniuses are just like this purple-haired girl who is attacking with full force. Up on the balcony, the young prince tells his father that they made the absolute right choice by trusting her. He explains that infinite talent remains buried forever simply because those people never get a real chance to shine. Suddenly, the master stops her strike with just 2 fingers and stares at the young girl with a completely new expression. Looking closely at her unwavering eyes, the old veteran realizes she possesses a spirit that was truly born for the blade. He knows that she can already see the hidden flow of mana, even without any formal training to guide her. Her unique perception goes beyond the boundaries of common sense and directly mirrors his own deep understanding of energy. The master realizes she has already stepped onto the infinite path of the sword, which is a legendary feat for her age. A gentle breeze slowly sweeps across the quiet arena as the dust from their intense clash finally starts to settle down. Lowering his wooden weapon, the legendary warrior admits she proved her incredible skills and asks for her name once more. He tells her that nobody will ever doubt her worth again, and she must declare her true identity with absolute pride. Hearing those kind words, she looks up with a bright expression and proudly announces that her name is Felicia. Looking down sad, the girl reveals she has no real last name because her father's family rejected her completely. Hearing her sad story, the wise old master looks at her with warm eyes and praises her for surviving such a tough life. Suddenly, the veteran warrior names her Felicia Brittner, which instantly makes her eyes widen with absolute shock. The master officially declares that she will proudly carry his own family name from this very moment onward. He surprises everyone by adopting her as his daughter, while promising to teach her both swordsmanship and noble manners. Looking at her seriously, he warns the young maid that her training will be grueling, and not a single moment will be easy. Standing close to her, the experienced master asks if she is truly ready to handle the immense pressure of his lessons. Kneeling beside her, the proud old man admits he was too stubborn and judged her character way too quickly at the start. The mentor asks the girl to always use her own sword to prove him wrong whenever his rigid views clash with her spirit. Tears fall from her eyes as the emotional young maid promises to show her absolute sincerity through the blade. Holding the weapon together, the 2 warriors vow to walk the infinite path of the sword as father and daughter. With a brand new name and a powerful destiny ahead, her legendary journey finally begins to unfold in earnest. Meanwhile, dark rumors quickly begin to spread within the castle as a mysterious hooded figure walks down a spiral staircase. Passing a secret letter to a messenger, the unknown master explains that the entire future of their house is now at stake. Confused by the sudden order, the loyal servant asks his leader what this urgent mission actually means for them. The mysterious informant explains that the Sword Saint has finally taken a disciple, which changes the entire political game. Glancing out the window, the hooded figure decides it is time to abandon their failing leader before everything falls apart. Walking down the torchlit hallway, the conspirator sets his sights on joining the rising star named Lucian Valdek. Inside the grand mansion, the loyal butler reports that worried letters are flooding in from several powerful families. Standing before his quiet master, the servant suggests taking immediate action before this tiny spark becomes a major fire. Clenching his fist tightly, the annoyed leader states that greedy parents always ruin their own kids with bad ambitions. Turning around, the Duke commands his butler to summon all his children for a special family dinner to settle things. Soon the young heirs receive the sudden invitation and prepare to prove their true worth using their own raw strength. Resting his chin on his hands, the blonde boy thinks about who truly possesses the fierce fangs of a wild beast. Under the bright full moon, the young master walks down the hallway of the grand mansion with his butler. Two maids standing inside the corridor look extremely surprised when they notice the young noble approaching them. The servants quickly line up and bow down to greet the blonde boy with absolute respect. Casually waving his hand, the friendly noble tells them to just carry on with their daily work. With a small smile on his face, he realizes his reputation has improved massively even inside the main family house. The young master remembers that just getting the purple-haired girl as a disciple was already a massive success. But the current reality is turning out even better than he ever anticipated. Watching the carriage leave, the boy wonders what kind of absolute monster the talented maid will eventually become. Moving past his thoughts, the young master arrives before the heavy wooden doors of the dining hall. Adjusting his elegant suit, the ambitious boy decides that it is finally time for him to get to work as well. With a loud sound, the massive double doors slowly swing open to reveal the family gathering. Inside the beautiful dining room, under a giant chandelier, the siblings are already sitting at the long table. Looking at them with clear annoyance, the gray-haired brother Jordy mocks the tense atmosphere in the room. Stepping inside with confidence, the main character responds with a calm and mysterious smile. Sitting across the table, the other blonde sibling looks down while grumbling about how miserable everyone seems. The loyal butler quickly pulls out a fancy chair for the young noble so he can take his seat. Breaking the heavy silence, Lucian cheerfully comments on how nice it is for all the brothers to finally meet. Looking directly at his eldest sibling, the blonde boy friendly asks if the gray-haired relative agrees with him. Clenching his fist, the grumpy older brother warns him that his sudden streak of good luck will not last forever. Wearing a cruel smirk on his face, Jordy coldly tells the young master to watch his back from now on. Instead of getting scared, the protagonist starts clapping his hands with a bright and incredibly playful expression. With a dramatic pose, the golden-eyed boy jokingly claims that his sibling is only acting tough out of pure love. He loudly praises how his relative handled the corrupt trainer at the arena with absolute ruthlessness. Sweating in pure panic, the other brother listens as Lucian exposes who paid back the stolen money. The young master dramatically claims that he would be a fool to ignore such amazing brotherly love. Suddenly, the blonde boy changes the subject and casually asks if their sister Jenny is doing all right. Hearing this mention, the gray-haired sibling grits his teeth in pure rage while sweating profusely. Sitting nearby, the youngest sibling and the servants realize that the older brother is just making things worse. Standing up in anger, the youngest brother yells at the protagonist and loudly demands an immediate apology. The angry kid suddenly freezes when he notices a terrifying shift in the overall mood of the room. Sighing deeply, the young master wonders if he needs to teach his little relative a physical lesson. Unleashing a dark aura, the main character asks the arrogant kid if he truly thinks he can test his patience. Terrified by this sudden surge of pure malice, the young sibling immediately steps back and stammers in fear. Suddenly, a heavy sound echoes through the room as everyone feels the tension boiling over. The powerful Duke enters the room and stands tall right before his silent children. Seeing their father appear, the young heirs immediately stand up to greet him with deep respect. Staring at them coldly, the stern leader remarks that having a bit of fire inside them is actually quite useful. The siblings freeze in complete shock when the master reveals his plans to send them all straight to the battlefield. Under the quiet night sky, the family sits back down to discuss the dangerous mission ahead of them. Resting his chin on his hand, the Duke asks if they are familiar with the notorious group known as the Liberation Front. He explains that these enemies are remnants from fallen states who want to destroy the peaceful rule of the empire. This violent group constantly starts rebellions and targets innocent nobles to create complete chaos in the lands. The Duke explains that he previously sent his eldest son Tristan to the borders to destroy the growing threat early on, although they only faced small fights before a brand new report has arrived that they simply cannot ignore. Hearing about the sudden escalation of the conflict, the gray-haired brother Jordy gulps in pure nervousness. Meanwhile, the main character stays completely silent while carefully analyzing the situation in his mind. A massive monster migration is starting to show dangerous signs in the region of Bornholm. Hearing this, the young master realizes that the situation is way more serious than he originally thought. This rare event involves a sudden spike in monster populations that quickly leave their homes to hunt down prey. The worst recorded case in history completely wiped out an entire castle along with 10 surrounding villages. Although it is too early to be sure, the Duke explains that managing this alongside the rebels is a massive burden. Listening closely, the young noble finally understands why their father wants to send them straight to the battlefield. Resting his hand on his face, the powerful Duke pauses for a brief moment while looking at his quiet children. Turning around, the father demands that one of his children must go there to clear the dark clouds over the region. With a serious gaze, the master asks if anyone wants to volunteer to help their eldest brother resolve the conflict. Jordy quickly realizes that whoever goes will just act as a sidekick and only help their older brother look good. He suggests sending their night orders instead, since none of the siblings have actual battlefield experience yet. Turning his cold eyes to the side, the father asks the youngest child if he agrees with that idea. Shaking in fear, the youngest brother quickly agrees and stammers that they should do exactly what Jordy suggested. Lucien speaks up and calmly states that sending their own troops is actually completely impossible. He explains that nearby lords might think the family is using the rebels as a fake excuse to start an invasion. Hearing this, the youngest brother gets completely shocked and wonders if other nobles would really suspect them. The angry kid slams the table and yells that they should just send a harsh warning to anyone who doubts them. He claims they do not need to walk on eggshells, but the main character calmly says his sibling is not entirely wrong. However, the protagonist warns that even the emperor himself might start doubting their loyalty for a second. He adds that their political enemies would definitely use this perfect opening to ruin their family reputation. Nodding in agreement, the powerful Duke sets down his cup and says his blonde son is absolutely correct. He explains that moving a massive army would easily make the royal family nervous, even if they are close allies. Looking back at his kids, the leader asks them what other smart plan they can think of to solve this issue. The youngest sibling sweats in panic while realizing that sending a regular official army is totally out of the question. The father explains that they need a clever solution that can calm the dangerous situation without causing any panic. Turning his eyes to his clever son, the Duke asks for his ideas, and the blonde boy says there is only one option. He explains that they must find an experienced group of fighters who only care about getting their job done. Jordy and his brother look confused when the protagonist says the soldiers must already belong to that local region. The leader listens closely as his son suggests hiring the local mercenary groups to handle the growing threat. Pointing out the next step, the blonde boy explains that they need someone of royal blood to keep those wild fighters in line. With a confident smile on his face, the young master proudly volunteers to take on this dangerous task himself. A few weeks later, we see a massive ship sailing smoothly across the ocean under a beautiful sunny sky. Standing on the deck, the blonde noble looks out at the open water alongside his strong companion. Holding a shiny silver coin, the protagonist prepares himself to deal with the wild fighters waiting for them. Looking ahead, he silently reminds himself that dealing with greedy mercenaries is always a massive pain. These fighters will easily move for gold, but even a mountain of money can never buy their true loyalty. They are the type of people who will instantly break their promise if a better deal comes along. Having worked as one of them in his past life, the boy knows they often run away just to stay alive. Managing them is actually quite simple for him, but the real challenge is dealing with his older brother. That relative is none other than Tristan Valdec, who currently rules the border with an iron fist. The young master remembers that this specific family member is a completely stubborn and annoying person. During his previous life, this strict warrior controlled every little detail and quickly punished anyone who made a mistake. Knowing how incredibly difficult his sibling can be, the blonde boy prepares for a very exhausting reunion. Flipping a shiny coin into the sky, the young master knows his older brother would never negotiate with wild sellswords. Catching the metal piece, he realizes this chaotic situation is actually a perfect feast prepared only for him. Wearing a creepy smile on his face, the boy looks forward to showing off his skills to those greedy fighters. Seeing this terrifying expression, the purple-haired companion steps back while sweating in complete confusion. Moving swiftly across the blue ocean, the massive ship finally arrives at the busy harbor of the northern region. Stepping onto the solid stone dock, the noble gets ready to meet the local forces waiting for him. Approaching with deep respect, a veteran knight named Sir Raymond warmly welcomes the young master to the land. The senior warrior mentions that he heard about how the brave boy volunteered for this dangerous mission. Knowing the heavy weight on the child's shoulders, the commander prepared a top-tier escort team to protect him. He explains that the elite fighters who previously helped the noble are already working hard in the shadows. These strong allies are currently scanning the area and plan to meet up with their leader at a later time. The veteran knight asks if the boy wants to go see his oldest sibling first, and the young master quickly agrees. Taking his first step forward, the ambitious noble is ready to face whatever trouble lies ahead of him. Running through the narrow streets, the rebels from the Liberation Front try their best to escape the guards. One member offers to sacrifice himself to buy time, but his leader immediately tells him to shut up. Chasing them closely, a powerful squad of armored cavalry easily keeps up with their frantic pace. Looking ahead with sheer desperation, the leader suddenly notices a perfect target to help them escape. Standing at the nearby harbor, the young master is casually chatting with his personal guards. The rebel leader plans to take the wealthy-looking kid hostage to secure a safe way out. Drawing his weapon, the desperate captain prepares to strike down the guards before they can even react. Suddenly, the blonde boy appears right in front of the attacker with a terrifying speed. Freezing in pure shock, the criminal cannot believe how fast the young master moved. Smiling wildly, the protagonist asks the intruder if he can join in on their little game. A massive shockwave suddenly explodes and leaves a dark silhouette standing inside the thick smoke. Hit by an overwhelming force, the enemy captain falls straight to the ground, completely knocked out. Watching from a distance, the other rebels stare in complete disbelief at their fallen commander. One of the survivors realizes they are dealing with a monster who defeated their boss in a single second. The rebels are terrified when they realize the noble defeated their strong boss without even drawing his sword. Feeling absolute joy, the blonde boy smiles widely as his physical body finally moves exactly how he wants it to. His fully restored heart pumps like a volcano, while immense mana flows through his entire system to answer his call. Realizing his current strength is on a whole different level, the boy is incredibly pleased with his new performance. Looking at the remaining enemies, the young master asks if they still fail to understand how outmatched they are. Releasing a massive burst of energy, the blonde noble warns the attackers that he will not give them another chance. Staring at them with cold eyes, the powerful teenager commands the entire group to get on their knees immediately. Realizing they stand absolutely zero chance of winning, a nervous rebel drops his weapon and quickly kneels on the floor. The surviving enemies completely surrender and beg for mercy for the sake of the young members in their group. Hearing their desperate cries, the protagonist looks down and feels his brief moment of excitement quickly fade away. He notices that the eyes of the young fighters are completely filled with nothing but pure hatred and anger. The blonde master sighs while thinking about how this endless conflict always leaves such a bitter taste in his mouth. Resting his hand on his weapon, the blonde noble promises to give them a formal trial if they cooperate. Looking down at the kneeling prisoners, he warns them not to try anything foolish while they wait. Suddenly, a group of heavily armored knights arrives on horses to secure the perimeter. Dismounting from his dark horse, a massive warrior steps forward and speaks about the laws of the empire. Standing tall, the newcomer explains that every regular citizen actually deserves a fair judgment. Looming over the captured fighters, he explains that those who turn against the kingdom lose all their rights. This cold leader is none other than Tristan Valdec, and he instantly sentences every single rebel to death. Hearing this terrible news, one of the prisoners becomes extremely furious and refuses to accept this fate. Jumping up with a sharp dagger, the desperate fighter yells that the Empire is the one that started this war. Facing the sudden attack, the cold warrior remains completely calm and does not even try to dodge. With a single swift flash of light, the powerful knight easily takes down the attacker in a second. The rebel coughs heavily after getting instantly shut down by the powerful warrior. The remaining rebels scream in total shock when they see their leader fall so easily. They are quickly forced down onto the cold stone ground with no hope of escape. Tristan turns to his younger brother and tells him to remember this harsh lesson. The older sibling coldly explains that this brutal punishment is their family standard. They finally arrive at the massive Bornholm fortress, which serves as their main base. Dark birds fly over the quiet towers of the castle, while a tense mood hangs in the air. Looking out the window, the young master recalls that his brother was never this ruthless in his past life. He suddenly realizes that he has absolutely no memories of this fortress from his previous existence. The blonde boy wonders if there is a massive secret happening behind the scenes that he does not know about. He notices that the heavy atmosphere inside the castle feels extremely strange. The kid realizes the local situation is far more dangerous than the official reports suggested. Stepping closer to the map table, the protagonist points out that their defense perimeter is basically gone. Tristan agrees with the map analysis and explains that their main army is currently busy fighting the rebel forces elsewhere. He explains that they hired mercenaries to fill the gap, but those fighters are already demanding a new deal for more money. Glaring coldly, the strict commander complains that these greedy men are holding the safety of the empire hostage for cash. Listening quietly, the young master realizes his stubborn sibling is trying to apply noble logic to wild sellswords. Turning around, the teenager points out that those shady warriors simply see this crisis as a golden chance to make a fortune. Standing tall, the proud knight insists that he will never negotiate with those untrustworthy fighters under his watch. Looking down at his little brother, the armored fighter says he does not expect much from someone forced to travel here. Pointing at the map pieces, the commander tells the kid to just make sure the sellswords do not run away during the battle. Listening to these low expectations, the blonde boy remains completely quiet with a very serious look on his face. A slight smirk appears on his lips when the youth tells his older brother that he is completely wrong about a few things. Step firm, the protagonist explains that nobody forced him to come to the border since he volunteered for this duty. Placing a sealed envelope on the wooden table, the young master claims he already has a perfect plan to solve the trouble. Showing off the red wax seal, the blonde noble reveals that their father granted him total control over all the mercenary groups. With a confident grin, the clever hero tells his shocked brother to just sit back and let him handle the negotiations. Later that night, we see the two figures walking out of the grand building to finally begin their dangerous next move. With a cold gaze, the young master promises to settle this messy situation once and for all. Inside a lively tavern in the Northern Territory, the local mercenaries gather to drink and celebrate. Raising a massive wooden mug, the rowdy captain urges his men to squeeze the wealthy nobles for all their money. A sly companion praises his leader for having the courage to pull such a bold stunt against the powerful house. The red-haired warrior explains that the double crisis of the rebels and the monsters makes this a perfect payday. They plan to wait until the desperate nobles come crawling back with bags of gold before bleeding them completely dry. Suddenly, the noisy celebration is cut short when the slow sound of clapping echoes from the dark entrance of the hall. Whispers fill the noisy room as the young master and his strong companion confidently step inside the tavern. Smiling calmly, the prince admits that any smart leader would naturally grab a good business chance to make money. But the logic quickly changes when they approach the rowdy boss who says they must act like loyal hunting dogs. The blonde youth stares back coldly and immediately recognizes this fierce fighter as the famous Red Blade Sven. Nearby mercenaries grip their heavy weapons while the two visitors stand completely unfazed by the sudden threat. Sven suddenly bursts into crazy laughter and commands his crew to warmly welcome their rich guest with the gold. The rowdy sellswords celebrate their massive payday while the wild scene reflects in the golden eyes of the hero. The red-haired captain pours a fresh drink and suggests they start their long negotiation with a nice toast. Sven grins wildly and mentions that they should clear up any misunderstandings before starting their real business. Keeping his arms crossed, the calm prince reminds the greedy fighters that they already signed a binding contract. Mockingly tearing a paper, the red-haired captain complains that the current payment is just useless pocket change. Showing a devious smile, the smug leader suggests finding a much better deal that can satisfy everyone in the room. Staring back with a cold look, the blonde youth agrees that settling this matter with money is indeed the easiest path. He casually reaches inside his pouch and tosses a massive silver coin onto the dusty table. The fighters look completely stunned when they realize this single piece is worth hundreds of gold coins. Smiling at their absolute shock, the young master casually throws a handful of these rare coins into the air. Tossing the shiny platinum coins, the young noble smiles while the greedy boss thinks he has found a massive sucker. The red-haired leader quickly changes his attitude and dramatically bows down to offer his full loyalty for the gold. Leaning down to collect the precious coins, the captain is suddenly stopped by the cold shadow of the young master. Invoking his family name, the blonde boy addresses the whole tavern and places a massive bounty on a new target. The protagonist orders them to eliminate their own commander, leaving the red-haired boss completely frozen in shock. Smiling coldly, the teenager whispers that a fighter who breaks his word is nothing more than a common street thug. Lifting his wooden mug, the noble announces that the reward will be cut in half the moment he finishes his drink. Sven frantically shouts at his crew to stop wavering before begging the young prince for a much cheaper deal. The cold protagonist calmly finishes his drink, while the terrified captain promises to work like a loyal dog. Setting his cup down, the blonde noble praises the quick survival instincts of the red-haired commander. Suddenly, a green-haired warrior leaps forward and instantly strikes down his own commander from behind. The traitor mocks his fallen boss, while the rest of the crew watches the brutal scene in complete shock. The shiny coins sit in a pool of blood as the killer asks if the young master will honor his word. Flashing a cold smile, the blonde prince accepts the results and congratulates the warrior on his new position. The greedy traitor quickly runs out of the tavern doors with his bag of gold, while the other fighters chase after him. The runaways do not make it very far before their short chase ends in a very silent and cold manner. Back inside the tavern, the young noble raises his cup and suggests offering a toast to their newly retired leader. Watching him sit down with complete ease, the remaining fighters sweat as they realize how dangerous this boy truly is. The blonde master reassures the crowd that he is ready to pay them handsomely as long as they get the job done properly. Showing a shiny silver coin, his golden eyes glow as he prepares to make them a highly tempting new offer. Looking at the fallen boss, the prince declares that everyone there will soon be desperate to hunt down their real enemies. Offering 1 platinum coin for every target, the young master promises an even bigger bonus if they bring them back alive. Hearing this ridiculous amount of wealth, the greedy fighters immediately go wild and shout praises to his family. While spinning a shiny coin, the clever boy smiles because he just mobilized the entire local population with his riches. Later that night, the veteran knight sits quietly by the window while contemplating their sudden success. The young master slowly approaches his companion with a heavy bag of gold to make a highly important request. He tells the senior warrior to simply stay by his side and watch no matter how crazy things get. The protagonist explains that these wild fighters do not need any more bloodshed since they already ignore his brother. Smiling slyly, the blonde boy holds the gold because he knows sweet bait is the perfect way to rot their souls. The veteran knight watches from the shadows and realizes that the prince was actually weaponizing their greed. By forcing the fighters to turn on their own boss, the young lord made sure they have no other choice but to obey. Looking out the window, the veteran admits that the boy has incredibly clever and calculated plans. Far away in the dark woods, the greedy traitor runs away with the bag of gold after his terrible deed. However, a heavily injured fighter is coughing nearby while holding onto his broken weapon in the dark. Sitting on the cold ground, the green-haired man desperately wonders if his painful struggle is finally over. The green-haired traitor celebrates his successful betrayal and cheers about his easy victory in the dark forest. Standing over his former captain, he mockingly says that being blinded by greed only leads to a pathetic end. Suddenly, a terrifying shadow looms directly behind him under the creepy red moon. The powerful commander Hugo appears out of nowhere and presses a cold blade against the thief's neck. Shaking with fear, the coward desperately begs for mercy and offers to split his gold with the stranger. Looking down coldly, the former gang leader explains that he is definitely not a soft-hearted warrior. Crying in utter despair, the criminal laughs bitterly because his dark life is finally coming to an end. A swift strike takes down the greedy thief, leaving his body on the cold ground as Hugo collects the gold. The former gang leader quickly defeats the greedy traitor and reclaims the stolen bag of gold from his cold hands. Under the crimson moon, the powerful warrior quietly walks away to report his successful mission back to the young master. Sitting alone in his dark room, the clever blonde prince happily inspects the glowing platinum coins resting on his table. The young noble smiles in the dark while admitting to himself that he truly owes a massive favor to his loyal companion. The next morning, some guards in the courtyard look completely shocked after reading the latest official announcements. High up on the castle wall, the stern older brother watches his men and quietly praises the young master's big success. Tristan warns that he would have punished his brother for any mistakes before officially giving him control of the army. The older sibling is incredibly proud that his father finally acknowledged his great efforts at the border. Still, he knows that even a strong candidate can lose everything in an instant after a single defeat. The blonde boy finds this entire situation highly suspicious and decides to ask his sibling some questions. He points out that humans and monsters are natural enemies who have been locked in a deadly cycle of violence. The report claims the rebels are living peacefully alongside the beasts, which makes absolutely no sense to him. The red-haired commander replies that his own trusted advisors have already verified this bizarre report. An elite knight explains that the enemies must be using magical relics to easily hide from the wild creatures. The older brother explains that different monster species can actually team up during a massive migration. However, the young hero knows that these wild beasts are natural enemies who would normally destroy each other on sight. Since this peaceful coexistence is impossible, the clever boy wonders if powerful mages are secretly behind this chaos. Magic is a forbidden power that defies the laws of nature and can easily wipe out a whole castle in a single moment. 300 years ago, the mages rebelled, and the empire decided to eliminate anyone associated with this dark art. Hearing these dangerous thoughts, the older brother warns him to choose his words carefully to avoid starting a massive fire. Tristan reminds his sibling to only focus on the mercenaries and let their great noble house resolve everything. Glaring down at the blonde boy, the older brother firmly asks if he truly understands the dangerous situation. Bowing his head, the young prince politely apologizes and claims his first deployment made him a bit too eager. Tristan agrees and walks away to deal with the ruffians before they can try to run away with the family gold. Meanwhile, a chilling wind blows through the quiet woods as the scene shifts to the dark northern forest. Suddenly, a pack of wild beasts with glowing red eyes slowly emerges from the thick fog. A mysterious cloaked figure stands perfectly still as the monsters approach him without showing any aggression. Pulling back his hood, the man nervously admits that visiting this creepy place always makes his heart drop. Raising a glowing device, the traveler recites a secret code to request a private meeting with his ally. Charon arrives and warns his shocked comrade that their secret plans are suddenly falling apart. The leader explains that the blonde prince completely ruined their scheme and wiped out their entire squad. Realizing the youth is a massive threat, the worried accomplice suggests proceeding with way more caution. The ally looks at the growling beasts and wonders if they can truly trust a mage who controls monsters. Charon explains they must work together with this creepy magic user because they lack the force to fight alone. A wicked smile appears on his face as he plans to eliminate both of the prestigious heirs at the same time. The partner sighs in frustration because their simple task is turning into a highly dangerous nightmare. The conspirators panic and demand their hidden stalker to show his face after easily slipping past their monster guards. Stepping out of the darkness, the masked blonde prince calmly tells them that he has some serious business to discuss. Drawing his sharp dagger, the young master unleashes a terrifying wolf aura and says he does not need 2 survivors. With a cold look, the boy explains that only the first person to speak will get a single chance to stay alive. The foggy forest remains completely quiet while the dark night breeze passes through the trees. Without wasting any time, the enemy rushes forward and swings his sharp blade with massive force. Moving like a shadow, the blonde boy easily ducks under the heavy blow to dodge the attack. He swiftly slides past his opponent and delivers a quick strike that cuts deep. Gasping in pure shock, the wounded man clutches his neck while struggling to stay on his feet. Refusing to surrender, the desperate warrior screams loudly and raises his sword for a final strike. The young master narrows his glowing golden eyes and finishes the battle with one powerful cross slash. The protagonist delivers a devastating slash that easily defeats the powerful enemy leader in seconds. Standing over the fallen foe, the young lord terrifies the surviving conspirator who cannot believe his eyes. Looking at the masked fighter, the stunned accomplice desperately wonders about the true identity of this monster. Although escaping the castle alone was a massive risk, the boy knows this dangerous trip is absolutely necessary. Gripping his blade, he knows that only real combat can properly sharpen his senses for the upcoming war. Shivering in fear, the hooded man slowly steps back while trying to maintain his pride. He accuses the protagonist of being a loyal hound of the Duke who can never stop their secret plans. The blonde youth merely smiles because he finds their secret cause to be incredibly amusing. Looking at the enemy, the masked boy warns that their foolish plans will soon unleash absolute hell in the region. He explains that the Empire will completely destroy their entire city once they learn about the forbidden magic. The blonde youth points out that the dark mage will easily betray them and treat them like simple prey in the end. The angry rebel claims they only teamed up with a regular magic user to finally secure their freedom from the crown. Staying quiet for a brief moment, the young master advises his opponent to finally wake up and face the harsh reality. Pointing to the red eyes in the dark, the prince asks if they truly think some simple toys can control giant monsters. The protagonist asks why so many of their comrades had to die before, if finding a mage was such an easy solution. He adds that the mysterious magic user was definitely the one who approached them first with some fake promises. The masked boy explains how the dark mage only used them as cheap tools to execute a secret plan. The rebel drops to his knees in complete despair after realizing they were being played from the very beginning. Looking up in absolute confusion, the man wonders why an enemy would share such a critical secret with him. Pulling down his mask, the young master prepares to show his face, which leaves the captive completely frozen. Smiling mockingly, the clever protagonist states that he simply wants to achieve a much better outcome. The prince directly demands that the warrior choose between disappearing in misery or stopping the disaster. A strong wind sweeps through the quiet woods as the secret meeting in the forest finally comes to an end. Back inside his room, the blonde hero holds a scroll while staring out the giant glass window to plan his moves. Standing in the room, the young prince announces his plan to catch the real enemy, which immediately surprises his allies. Hugo quickly realizes the request to find a simple artifact was just a cover to personally infiltrate the dangerous forest. Telling his worried friend to stop nagging, the clever hero explains that he absolutely had to confirm things himself. While discussing the unnatural monster migration, the blonde youth places his hand on the desk to reveal the real culprit. This mastermind is a dark mage named Jude Digrek, who uses forbidden magic to control and fuse demonic beasts like pawns. To prevent a terrible massacre, the protagonist decides to act alone, even if it means opposing his strict older brother. Under the dark night sky, a mysterious robed figure slowly walks through the foggy and quiet woods to reach his destination. Looking at the glowing night sky, the mysterious mage notices that the fate star of the region is getting much brighter. He feels a deep sense of regret for making a contract with the Dark Leader and wishes he could escape this danger. The man notes that the foolish rebels have no idea they signed a contract with a black mage who represents pure evil. Inside the quiet forest cabin, the desperate cries of young children echo as they beg their grandfather for mercy. Bloody handprints cover the window glass when a weak little boy begs his older sister to run away from the house. Suddenly, a terrified young girl wakes up inside a dark stone cell and peeks through the wooden door in absolute fear. A massive black wolf with glowing eyes suddenly lunges forward to attack the helpless child in the darkness. The sinister mage walks past his victims, while holding a glowing red sphere created from the local children. To gain ultimate power, the evil magic user is willing to sacrifice everything and unleash a dark chaos onto the world. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the sunny border region, where a massive army camp is currently established. Inside the main command tent, a soldier reports that the regular forces have already departed for the main battlefield. The guard adds that the clever third prince has recently bought many tracking tools and is hiring local mercenary groups. The messenger suggests that the young protagonist has finally uncovered the dark truth about the ongoing crisis. Hearing the report, the older brother lets out a calm smirk because he always expected his sibling to achieve great results. Standing inside the command room, the red-haired commander asks his worried assistant if he still has doubts about the plan. Looking at the documents, the assistant explains that the recent monster activities point to a dark alliance with mages. The aide warns that launching an all-out attack will quickly leave their main fortress completely defenseless. Glaring back with absolute coldness, the strict leader asks why that would matter, which instantly terrifies his subordinate. Dropping quickly to his knees, the scared assistant begs for mercy, while the commander slowly steps forward to face him. The cold leader admits those worries are logical, but wonders if this region is even worth protecting anymore. He mentions that the empire wanted to use the rich borderlands as a strong shield against foreign invaders. Because of this strategic value, the royal crown previously provided them with massive resources and protection. The long peace allowed local lords to grow powerful, but also fueled a dark conspiracy born from pure greed. Looking at his subordinate, the eldest brother claims that these plotting nobles are no different from the rebels. Clenching his armored fist, he decides to use this crisis to completely control both the citizens and the greedy lords. Although his helper warns about the massive casualties, the cold commander intends to call this bloody cleanup purification. Far away under the beautiful sunset, a mysterious group of cloaked riders quietly makes its way through the dark woods. The messenger reports that they successfully delivered the secret information to the legendary Black Lions. Praising his loyal shadow units, the leader smiles, while noting how the choices of the two young masters are polar opposites. While the oldest brother accepted the brutal bloodshed, the blonde boy completely refused to follow that dark path. Keeping a close watch on them is Edwin, the powerful chief of intelligence, who secretly decides to root for the young hero. The story shifts to a few days ago inside the luxurious mansion where the leaders gather for a secret meeting. The butler reports to the Duke that their youngest child was indeed selected to go to the dangerous northern border. The ruler notes that his son is building massive momentum, but the helper worries the boy might get completely crushed. The father explains that the kid will just become a simple puppet if he blindly obeys without using his own brain. Standing tall, the powerful Duke declares that he never prepares easy paths for his children to succeed. The Duke stands before a giant portrait of his late wife, while explaining that they must clear the path for the youngest boy. Remembering his deceased wife, the powerful ruler commands his loyal assistant to support the kid as an old friend. Standing on a high cliff at sunset, the chief of intelligence accepts his new secret mission with a calm smile. Meanwhile, a massive squad of heavily armed cavalry rides out of the fortress to begin their dangerous campaign. Inside the castle gates, many terrified citizens gather and weep while fearing the upcoming monster attack. Watching from a high window, the blonde hero observes the worried crowd below to understand the current situation. A dark realization hits the young noble as he learns that almost all their forces are heading directly to the front line. The protagonist tries to warn his older brother about the trap, but the stubborn commander completely dismisses his concerns. This cold reaction makes the youth realize that his siblings actually wants the fortress to fall to achieve his dark goals. Feeling disgusted by the ruthless schemes of the High Lords, the blonde boy resolves to act without any more hesitation. Gathering his loyal allies in the dark of night, the clever master declares that they will proceed with their secret mission. Under the cover of darkness, the brave group prepares to enter the creepy woods to hunt down the dangerous demonic beasts. Deep inside the dark forest, a tall tower stands under the purple sky while two cloaked guards patrol the area. Walking through the thick fog, one of the men complains about getting stuck guarding a creepy old magic user. The warrior spits in disgust while mentioning how the loud screaming never stops inside that hidden cabin. Wiping his face, the fighter reveals that the overwhelming smell of blood on the sorcerer is completely terrifying. His partner quickly warns him to watch his language since their entire rebellion relies on the power of these mages. The companion reminds him how they saw the magic users summon a literal meteor to easily crush their enemies. Even though they dislike their strange allies, the bald warrior says they must endure this nightmare for their cause. Suddenly, a hidden rope trap snaps shut around the loud fighter and suspends him high in the air as he struggles to breathe. Dangling helplessly in the air, the trapped guard struggles to break free, while his partner looks around in confusion. Hearing a sudden noise nearby, the bald warrior turns his head to see what is happening in the dark forest. Our masked hero suddenly appears right behind the target and catches him completely off guard with a cold stare. With one swift movement, the protagonist delivers a silent strike to neutralize the threat before he can even scream. The sudden noise scares the crows in the trees, which immediately alerts the other guards patrolling the area. They decide to investigate the strange commotion, but they walk straight into a deadly ambush in the foggy woods. The young master easily defeats the remaining enemies and quietly walks away to continue his secret mission. Slipping through the dark shadows, the blonde boy smiles as he gets ready to confront the evil mastermind.